This is Erin Steeg. She is our new grant administrator, so we're very excited to have her join our team. And fun fact, today is her birthday as well. So.
Oh, Erin.
Thank you. I feel very happy to be here.
Well, why don't you sing happy birthday for us?
Yeah, no.
It's supposed to be the other way around.
Yeah, I know. We do well, but that's old school.
Welcome aboard.
Nice to see you.
Okay, we'll call the meeting to order and if we could have our, please.
Sure, Governor,
Yes,
Attorney General, and Commissioner Goring.
Here.
We have a quorum.
okay, great. Doug, thanks for joining us remotely. We'll jump right in. And the first order of business is DMR. And Lynn, Mark, thank you for being here. Take it away.
Thank you, Governor. We have 4 orders for your consideration for our initial items of business. They're each unique, so we'll be looking at them one at a time. The first is Order 32940. It's in case 28907. This is an unusual case in that it's a dispute over proper costs, and those are extremely rare. What you see here is a set of spacing units where the applicant Versa is a non-operated working interest owner in wells that at the time were operated by Equinor. A little bit different picture of that. Those are the 16 spacing units where Versa is the non-operated working interest owner and Equinor was the operator. The dispute is over saltwater disposal, gathering, and disposal costs. So Versa asked the commission to do 3 things: determine the proper costs, and then provide injunctive relief against Equinor or their successor for charging these, and then also to award damages and interest. So we'll get to that in just a minute. There was an issue over witnesses. Equinor brought a witness. She was the manager in Williston at the time, Ms. Kate Beck. They did not reveal Kate during the discovery process, but they did, prior to the hearing, let Versa and the commission know that she would be an on-call witness, and so she came and testified. Versa objected to her testimony, but the Assistant Attorney General went through all the rules dealing with administrative hearings, and having taken that objection under advisement, determined that we were going to put Ms. Beck's testimony in the record. And what she testified to was how they came up with their saltwater gathering and disposal costs. There was some dispute over testimony offered by Mr. Hansen from Versa. He relied on an expert to do some calculations, some estimations of capital investment and operating costs of the disposal system. So there was an objection to that testimony, but again, under the rules of the Administrative Practices Act, I believe it's since 700s, it's listed in the order. Under the proper rules as determined by our Assistant Attorney General, that testimony can be part of the case, and so we made it part of the case. Equinor used a pipeline to transfer about 87.5% of all the produced water from the Versa spacing units. They set their transportation rates based on something they defined as a fair tender process. So they went out and got bids from 6 different trucking companies. And then they took the average of those 6 trucking bids per barrel, and they used that as what they charged their non-operated working interest partners for transportation of the saltwater. However, that's not how they transported it. They transported it through a pipeline. And they testified that they did that because it's better for the environment. It's safer. It's also cheaper. They were asked by Versa and by the commission to provide their capital costs and operating costs for that system, and declined to do so. We even left the record open for a period of time so that they could enter those. So the costs that Mr. Hanson presented were undisputed. Mr. Hanson, through the work of Mr. Gerbig,
And Mr. Hanson was with Versa.
Mr. Hanson was with Versa,
Who felt they were overcharged.
who felt that they were overcharged. A little bit of legalese, and I've got to be careful here, but pooling orders by the commission do state that owners should reimburse operators for their proportionate share of reasonable actual costs. And that if there's a dispute, the commission shall determine the proper costs. So that's the litmus test that we used. Were they actual? Were they reasonable? And what's the proper cost? And having weighed all the evidence that was presented and working through it, we have determined, and the order that we're asking you to approve, that Versa's estimate of the costs is the proper costs that they should be charged. And so instead of being charged approximately $2 per barrel, they should be charged 35 cents per barrel. And that the fair tender process is not the actual cost. That doesn't per se make it unreasonable, but it's not the actual cost. Even though an Equinor subsidiary was billing another subsidiary that cost, it wasn't the actual cost. They were just billing it based on this fair tender process that they went through. So in addition, in the order, it says that you don't have the authority and therefore you decline to award damages or interest. That'd be something for a district court to determine. And also don't have the authority and decline to issue an injunction or a restraining order. Your role is simply to determine the proper costs. And so this order, it's going to end up going to court. This order determines that the proper costs is the uncontested cost that Versa presented at the hearing, which is 35 cents per barrel.
And their Versa's calculation was based on what you determined to be a reasonable understanding of the pipeline infrastructure they built and what it would take to transfer salt water by pipeline. And the tender offer was based on trucking.
Correct.
So they charged for trucking, but the actual cost was pipeline
The actual cost was for pipeline.
for 87%. So I guess 13%.
Yes.
Does the tender apply to the 13% that would have been trucked?
It does. Versa is not challenging any of the costs on spacing units that have a non-operated interest in that aren't part of these 16, and they're not contesting the water that was trucked. They're fine because that was the actual cost. But the 87.5% that was delivered by pipeline, and I know this is hard to read, but they were very detailed in their calculation of the costs and presented a lot of evidence as to how they arrived at the 35 cents per barrel. And it was very convincing. And so that's all part of the record. If and when this is challenged in court, and I would anticipate, because we're talking about at least $1 million of overcharges, that they'll be going to district court with your order and asking the court for the damages and also for the interest and for an injunction.
Equinor was offered the opportunity to present their actual cost for the pipeline.
They were.
And you said they declined.
Right. So they were asked at the hearing, and then the record was left open to give them an opportunity to rethink declining that and actually provide that post-hearing in some period of time, and they declined, maintaining that their fair tender process was reasonable and actual.
There was no misgiving though, right? They understood that everyone recognized how it was being actually transported. And they just had a different philosophy about how they should be built. They should be able to do it build a more expensive.
Build a more
I just remember
expensive
missing
mode of
something. It's like
transportation.
people would be standing there, we wouldn't be having a discussion about this is not the governor, and we'd have to argue about it for a long time or something. I mean, we wouldn't do that if they were in the room. they just had, what was the basis of their conclusion that they could bill it however they wanted, regardless of what they were transporting it at?
Their basis was that their subsidiary was realizing an opportunity cost, that their subsidiary had taken the risk of building a pipeline, and the opportunity cost then that they should make a large profit off that pipeline because their competition was trucking the water. And so that was their basis, and their argument was that they had taken the risk of building the pipeline and should be able to profit from that as an opportunity cost.
It was just advocacy. It wasn't like a misperception. Somebody had it wrong. They're advocating for this. They believe that's the person.
So any have a recommendation for the commission?
Yes, so the recommended order states that the proper costs that Versa should be billed are 35 cents per barrel, based on Mr. Hanson and Mr. Gerbig's testimony, and that you decline to award damages or interest, and also that you decline to provide injunctive or restraining relief.
So
So
that's
moved.
outside the scope of our,
It is,
they asked us to do something outside our scope, so we're not going to do stuff outside of our scope.
correct.
But we are going to affirm at least the only evidence we have of the actual cost.
That's right. And the statute says that it is your job to determine the proper costs when there's a dispute. And so we held a very lengthy hearing, and everybody had the opportunity through discovery and through the hearing process to present actual costs. And there was this big difference in philosophy about what reasonable and actual costs are. But we came to the conclusion that actual means actual, what it really costs you to do this operation.
Do we have a motion?
So move.
Motion
Second.
by, in a second. Any comments or questions? Call for the vote.
Commissioner,
Yes.
Attorney General,
Yes.
Governor,
Yes.
Thank you.
And Reese, can you turn up Commissioner a little bit? Thank you.
All right.
Okay, next.
The second order is Order 33123 in case 30510. This is an application by CODA, CODA Resources Operating. They're proposing a 2,560 acre section line spacing unit, as you can see up there in Fertile Valley in Divide County. Got a map here. So we are asking you to deny CODA's application. This is a depiction of what they're proposing to do. They have 2 3-mile spacing units on either side of the section line. A little bit of it is partially developed, so their intent in this area is to drill 3-mile laterals. They testified that the economics of 3-mile laterals is superior, that's their plan for developing the area. We asked them, well, why would you want to drill a 2-mile lateral in the middle of these 3-mile laterals? And their testimony was, well, that piece of section line down there, that 3rd mile, is not prospective at today's oil prices. And then they stated that, well, later on, they would probably come back at different oil prices and drill 3 2-mile laterals to fill out that section line. Commission staff was unconvinced that that's the right way to go. Also in questioning, they said, well, that 3rd mile of that section line lateral would expose those 2 existing wells to frac hit risk, and also would have diminished value because of those 2 existing wells. The remarkable thing is that they're going to drill 3-mile wells just on the other side of it at the exact same distance. So the frac hit risk is no different than those 2 3-mile wells that they propose right alongside of it. And the diminished returns are no different than the 3-mile wells on the outside of those existing wells. So their testimony was unconvincing. It would result in either, 1, the waste of the oil in that section line and not protecting correlative rights, or number 2, drilling an unnecessary well, 3 2-mile wells instead of 2 3-mile wells. So we're asking you to deny CODA's application for the 2560 in that 2-mile section line well. Just the testimony just doesn't hold up. That section line well, if they're going to drill 3-mile wells on the outside of those existing wells and throughout this whole area, that should be a 3-mile well.
So moved.
And they have every opportunity, if denied, per your recommendation, to come back with a different plan.
Absolutely. They could come back with a plan to develop the whole area with 2-mile wells, which they're not going to do because the 3-milers, the economics are vastly superior, or come back with a proposal for a 3,840 acre facing unit and a 3-mile section line well. Yeah, they have every opportunity to come back and properly develop this thing.
Seek a motion?
So moved.
So moved.
Why does he always get to do this?
No, he doesn't. That was a
Like a
second.
seniority thing?
I did hear him a little bit earlier.
Can you play fair?
Yeah, I said something earlier. I don't know if you guys can hear me.
I picked it up.
We can hear you. We were just debating who made the motion and who seconded, so.
Oh,
got it covered.
okay,
Okay, we have a motion and a second.
no problem.
And, well, any questions or comments? Call for the vote?
Commissioner,
Yes,
Attorney General,
Yes.
Governor,
Yes.
Thank you. The third one, order 33312, case 30605. There's 2 wells and 2 spacing units involved here. Again, very unusual case. What we have is an application from Petro Hunt to order Rocky Top Energy, their successor in these 2 wells, to stop producing the wells. And the basis is that they did a well transfer. So you can see that's the other well. I think that's all I had on that one. The basis on this is that the transfer hasn't gone through because 3 of the wells on the transfer are in abandoned status. And under the law, I cannot transfer those wells until Rocky Top posts a single well bond for those wells, because we've learned the hard way that transferring abandoned wells turns into orphan wells. So by law, I can't transfer those. Petro Hunt says, well, having Rocky Top operate those 2 active wells under their bond puts them at risk because their surety said, well, we're not going to cover you if something happens. So they're asking us to, they want the wells to be transferred. They're asking you to order the wells shut in. Now, there's only 5 situations in the statute and rules that allow you to shut a well in. One is if there's a serious threat of pollution or injury to public health or safety because the well is going to leak. That's not the case here. One is because they haven't done a gas oil ratio test. Another, they haven't done a subsurface pressure test that you ordered them to do, or they haven't been filing oil production reports, which they are doing, or they haven't reported gas production, which they're doing, or they don't have an active Form 8. So we're asking you to deny Petro Hunt's application because you don't have the authority to shut these 2 wells in just because Petro Hunt wants you to. There are some things that they could do. For example, they could file a new transfer and transfer just these 2 wells. They're active producers. They don't need a single well bond. So they could fix the paperwork, deal with these 2 wells, and worry about the other 5 later with single well bonds. And we happily process 2 different transfers. The other thing they could do is write to us at the Oil and Gas Division and request that we revoke the Form 8s, which is the authorization to transport and sell oil from these wells. And we would do that because they're the current operator. And then the people who are transporting and purchasing the oil would have to stop. And that would effectively shut the wells in. But the relief that they ask for is not compliant with the statute and rules. So they have the opportunity to get the relief they want 2 other ways, relatively easily, but not through this commission order.
So you're recommending denial.
Denial.
I so move.
Second.
A motion and a second. And again, Lynn, they're aware that they have multiple other pathways to navigate legally through our processes.
They will be after today. We strongly avoid ex parte communications, when we're processing an order in a case like this that's got opposition. So we haven't communicated that to them, but the order lays that out, as will communications after today's meeting.
Some relatively rapid pathways towards resolution.
Yes. It can be dealt with probably before the end of the week.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. We'll call for the vote.
Commissioner,
Yes.
Attorney General,
Yes.
Governor,
Yes, motion carries.
Thank you. The final order is 32383, case 29775. You've seen these before. This is an operator who is the subject of a complaint and has ghosted us. And so we've served the complaint through the Secretary of State's office. They failed to file an answer. And so this is a default order for $17,609 in penalties and $307 in costs.
So move.
Ghosting?
That's
That's what my son does relative to his sisters. He ghosts us. He doesn't
Yeah.
respond to anything.
We attempted to serve this paperwork at the address we were given. It's a dumpster and there was no one in it. So I think ghosting is probably the
Good
right term.
diligence though, checking if there's anybody in it. You never know.
We did, the sheriff's deputy did open the dumpster lid and look. And, so it's pretty remarkable, but it is possible to serve this paperwork through the Secretary of State's office. But we literally cannot locate the individuals to serve this paperwork. And of course, there was no response. So
I did hear a motion.
We have a motion and a
And
second.
second.
We have a motion and a second in the High Plains Drifter case.
Great, but
Call for the vote.
Commissioner,
Yes.
Attorney General,
Yes.
Governor,
Yes. I'm especially happy that Lynn laughed at my reference.
that was fantastic.
I should be fair to my
One of
son.
my favorites.
He does reply at a 1-to-5 ratio. I should be fair. He doesn't not complete.
Thanks. We do have two other items for you to deal with under other business. The first is that we're at the very near the end of the Attorney General's office review of our rule changes. And yesterday, we were notified by the Attorney General's office that one of the rule changes needs to be amended and ratified by you. And it has to do with making the rule 100% consistent with the statute. It deals with certification of tertiary recovery projects and secondary recovery projects. It's a rule change that should have happened well in the past, and we just caught it this year with Mark's diligence. Anything else to say, Mark, about that? And so if you will ratify the overstrike that, oh, they don't have it. Okay. If you will ratify
Yes,
that,
I have them.
then the Attorney General's office is ready to
Thank you.
clear the path for your rule changes to go to the Administrative Rules Committee. That hearing being March 1st,
March 5th is tentatively scheduled.
March 5th, tentatively scheduled.
And so the change that's being asked for today is the striking of these few words as opposed to the addition of anything.
That's correct. And what this will do is it will strike words that are in the current rules that are stricken in the current statute. So there was some language that stayed in the rule that should have been removed when 5751.1 was modified to simplify the oil and gas taxes, and it didn't happen. Mark caught this, but we didn't quite get everything stricken out that needed to be. But the Attorney General's office has told us that if you will ratify this, then they can provide us the documentation that our rules can move forward to the Administrative Rules Committee.
So move.
Second.
Motion and second. Yeah, we know that removing red tape can be sticky sometimes, but
Sometimes it's very sticky red tape, but this really is, it fits the red tape reduction
Yeah.
scenario.
well, my only going to be, thank you, Mark, and thank you, the Attorney General's office for finding this, more regs to strike rules. So anyway, call for the vote.
Commissioner,
Yes,
Attorney General,
Yes.
Governor,
Yes. Motion carries. Okay.
Thank you. The other item that I want to bring up under other business is I have had the pleasure of serving in this position for 25 and a half years. And I believe it's time for a change. And so my intentions are to retire around the end of June of this year. It's been an honor to be involved in such an important part of North Dakota. I've served under 4 governors, 3 attorneys general, 2 ag commissioners, 13 legislative assemblies. So it's been a great run. The day I took the job, we had 3,155 wells that could produce in North Dakota. Today there's 21,000. And we had 96,000 barrels a day of production. Today it's 1.3 million. We had 33 employees at the oil and gas division, and today DMR has 108. That's a lot of efficiency because we've significantly increased production and well count a whole lot more than we increased staff. And so we found a lot of efficiencies over the 2.5 decades. But I want to thank you for being great bosses and friends, and let you know that it is my plan to make a change this year.
Well, Lynn, I just want to say right off the bat that I know that sort of all of North Dakota, whether it's industry, elected officials, whether it's the commission staff, is that hoping that you would have been honoring the fact that the term limits for your job is 50 years, not 25 or 26. So it's with a lot of reluctance that we would even, enter into this conversation. We do appreciate what you've done, remarkable, what's been accomplished. And I know that that's not just recognized here in the state. When I had an opportunity to serve for 2 years as the chair of the Interstate Oil and Gas Commission, it really was eye-opening for me early in my tenure as governor to see how every other state looked to North Dakota and specifically looked to you as someone, whether it was on abandoned wells, whether it was on gas capture, whether it was on supporting innovation in industry. I mean, looking to Lynn Helms and to North Dakota as the leader for that. And so you've served in an exemplary way for our state, for the industry. It's made a difference, not just for North Dakota and this industry, and its revenues have touched every single individual. I mean, every kid that's gone to K-12 in the last 26 years has benefited from your work. Every citizen who's ever driven on a state road has benefited from your work. And your mention about the efficiencies, I mean, having, nearly 13 to 15 times more of the oil production with only 3 times the staff. And of course, at much higher prices than we started before. So it's probably, 30 or 40 times more revenue than when you started. Is one of the great examples of efficiency in government, and the idea that we can create a regulatory environment that attracts capital and attracts talent to our state. You've done that. You built and led great teams, and you've made the job of this commission in some ways easy because of the great work that you've done. So we will have a time to properly honor you before you get out the door. It won't be today. But we know that that you had a chance to share this news with your team earlier this morning, and I'm sure there was that was a difficult and bittersweet, because I know how much you care deeply about that team. But if anybody has deserved to step, off and to take some personal time, you've made great sacrifices with your time and your energy for these more than 2.5 decades to serve the people of the state, and everybody has benefited from that. So on behalf of the commission, I want to just say, in behalf of the citizens of North Dakota, thank you, Lynn Helms, for what you've done.
say Lynn, this is Doug. as a regulator myself, I know it's challenging, and you always got a whole bunch of critics out there in the cheap seats. But I do have to tell you that I have very much appreciated your thoughtful, even-handed, and balanced approach to issues, and how you've thought everything through. You've made sure that we had all of the information, data, before we made decisions, and you thoroughly vetted those through code, through statute, through Century Code, and you gave us options all the time how we could move forward and still make a difference in the end. And I believe that's what's really helped create an environment for businesses to thrive, but also to have the proper oversight. And I probably can't say it enough, but I really appreciate you and thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Lynn, it's not all glowing. While I was lieutenant governor, I remember you being criticized by my friend, and she is my friend, Connie Triplett. And her criticism of Lynn Helms was that he was, and she would say the same in private conversation on the floor. And she was so angry that you were so good at both components of your job. How in the world could you possibly have been doing either of their competing interests, promoting an industry and regulating an industry? And she said he's literally so good at both. How can you? Connie, that's not coming across as a strong criticism, but it was. But she meant it too, guys. I know from private conversations. They're also with that glowing praise of your professionalism, capabilities, and all that you've done for the state. So it was a pleasure knowing you then, and once in a while seeing your quotes in the New York Times. They were always very colorful. We were appreciating all of those.
Yes. Yeah.
You served in interesting times.
Yeah. Are you thinking of the time I called something a 5-alarm fire?
5-alarm fire comes to mind. I remember Jack Dalrymple's, I'm not going to quote the governor, but I remember there's no profanity or anything. He was admiring how good you were at coming up with things that everybody wanted to print. It's like, not exactly the message.
Okay.
It's been a pleasure.
Well, thank you all very much. And it has been a pleasure. It's going to be hard to leave.
Sure.
Well, we'll have more time to celebrate and to properly do that. And I know we'll be entering something into the official record before Lynn's time is done, but we'll at least certainly let these comments be part of the record of this meeting from the three commissioners. And then just from a process standpoint, are we coming back? Because we have Lynn on the agenda later today, or is this it for today for DMR?
This is it for this particular topic.
Okay.
But Reese is going to just walk us through a recommendation for what comes next.
Okay, and then Lynn, if you can, as you always do, if you can stick around through Pipeline Authority and
Thanks, Reese.
the legal updates and all those other things.
I will. Yeah.
And it's always appreciated. Okay, Reese?
Thank you, Governor, Commissioners. If I could also just take a note, share gratitude with Lynn. I've had the opportunity to work with Lynn both in the private and public sector. Value your friendship, value your mentorship. There is no replacement for Lynn Helms. We're very blessed to have had you working with us and representing our state. And I think particularly to one example, during COVID, when oil was negative, everyone's hair was on fire. It was stressful times. Lynn was calm, helped us with the Bakken Restart Task Force, come up with the well plugging program that was then used as a national example for the Federal Regrow Act. We were able to reinvest our CARES Act dollars back into the state to solve an issue with abandoned wells, but at the same time, keep that industry working through the tough COVID times and keep them ready for kicking us back off. And just the amazing leadership that Lynn got us through all of that. And there's many more examples, but I just wanted to share gratitude for Lynn.
Thank you.
So it's hard to get to the next part, but we do have a recommendation for you commissioners on what our next steps are. And what we're recommending is that you would authorize today a search committee to start the process for recruiting the next director of the Department of Mineral Resources. So that packet I handed out to you on the second page, we have a draft search committee membership, which would be an appointee from each commissioner, recommending that we would also have 2 members from the Oil and Gas Research Council. And the members that I would recommend are Zach Weiss and Preston Page. Also recommending that Justin Kringstead with the Pipeline Authority serve on the search committee, as well as myself from the Office of the Industrial Commission. And our role being to assist the commission with the process of recruiting the next director, recommending that we would go through a procurement process for an executive search firm that would help assist with recruitment, help us assist with drafting a new job description and assessing what our talent pool is, recommending that the search committee would bring forward 2 to 4 candidates to the commission at a special industrial commission meeting for you to interview. It's very similar to the process that's being followed with the Bank of North Dakota executive search. Also recommending that we have a staff advisor from the Department of Mineral Resources, Robin Lammer, to assist the search committee with the process with administrative services and providing DMR specific information. Also in your packet I just handed out, we have a draft schedule. It is somewhat of an aggressive schedule given the amount of time that it'll take to go through the procurement process for a search firm, but we are confident that we could meet the schedule. And our goal would be that in early to mid-summer of 2024, we would have candidates to bring forth to the commission for your consideration.
Aaron, Reese, are you guys expecting to have a formal approval of this process by vote? Is that what the way this is being presented today?
Correct.
So we'll either seek a motion or open it for discussion. Doug, did you have something to say?
Yeah, I said it. It looked good. I was looking through it here. So if you need a motion, I'd so move.
Okay. We have a motion.
Second.
And then what's the time frame? So we have a motion in a second. What's the time frame that you'd be expecting to have appointees from the 3 commissioners to join this?
We would hope to have our first meeting scheduled by January 31st.
Okay.
So we would need appointees.
Okay. All right. And then any other questions from Doug or Drew? One thing I'll just say publicly, Lynn, name is not explicitly listed in here, which has been our practice with outgoing leaders. But I think I can, again, speak on behalf of the commissioners that as we go through this process, the person who served the longest and done the best job, that all of us would appreciate your personal counsel as we go through this process to make sure we find the best possible candidate, whether that's, and even though we're hiring a search firm, that means that we'll have both. In the goal of the search firm, of any search firm we're hiring for any cabinet position and any NDIC position, has been to make sure we have a strong pool of internal and external candidates, and getting people that are that have the requisite background to be able to do this. So that would be part of what we're charging that group to do, is just make sure we get a strong pool. Great searches start with strong pools, and we got to make sure we get a strong pool of candidates and then go from there. But Lynn, it's another way of saying I can speak for myself. I'll be counting on having conversations with you as we go through this to make sure that we're heading in a direction that reflects all the secrets you have on how you've done this job so well.
Thank you. And I will help out in every way that I can. I've already put together a essential job function list of pretty much everything I could think of that I do daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, semi-annually, annually, biannually. And so that'll be available for the search committee and the search firm. You shouldn't frighten people.
Right.
It's a fun job.
It's a little bit like when Carlene left and we found out that she was doing like 5 jobs, not 1. So it's hard to write a job description that is one person can do that takes 5. But we might be in the same spot here. So I mean, one of the things the search committee is going to actually have to look at is whether it's possible to actually replace Lynn, with one person. I mean, that's part of the way the breadth of this should be thinking about that in terms of, because this is when you grow with the job for 26 years, sometimes you just keep adding on, but stepping into the level of complexity and the dual mission that the Attorney General is talking about could be hard to find someone that can do all of that as well as you can and as effortlessly as you seem to do it. Okay, we'll call for the vote.
Commissioner,
Yes.
Attorney General,
Yes.
Governor.
Yes, motion carries.
Thank you. Bittersweet.
Thank you. And we will look forward to having you at all the meetings between now and when we're celebrating your actual departure, Lynn. Justin?
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. For those following along, the next item is the North Dakota Pipeline Authority.
In hindsight, I should have requested a gap of time between that announcement and being up here. I certainly would not have even had a chance to be in the seat had not Lynn believed in me many, many years ago and hired me as a student at the Geological Survey, Corps Library, and been a mentor and friend. And it's been quite the ride for all these years.
Well, there's a large contingent of Lynn Helms mentees, and I hope that we can get them all to be here when we're celebrating Lynn's departure. But
Yeah.
So
I apologize. Excuse me? I apologize. Nothing personal, Justin. I always love your reports, but I got to step away for just a little while. I'll try and rejoin everyone, and it'll be just a while. Thank you.
Okay.
Perfect. So this afternoon, my goal is to just provide an update on some key issues. There are some kind of pressing topics. The slide deck that you have in your binder has been updated to reflect some new events and some refreshed information. So the slides that you will see up on the screen will not mirror perfectly with what you have in your binder. So the first thing as we look forward, just to set the stage a little bit on production, the outlook, this is just a refreshed look of my production models going forward. The key number that you're going to have, and keep in the back of your mind as we enter 2024, is I think 40 drilling rigs is going to be a key number that we're going to watch closely. We've largely eroded our drilled but uncompleted, our duck well inventory, so we're going to be extremely reliant really on new drills this year at a level that we've always had the luxury of duck well inventory to work on. If rigs weren't there, if there was a disconnect, that is gone, and we're going to very much be reliant on the drill bit this year to keep production healthy. So you're looking at those completions, somewhere in that 80 to 90 completions holds production relatively steady. This is just some nerdy information, but back to the 3-mile laterals and the 4-mile. I know Lynn received the first permit for a 4-mile lateral. Those are going to be increasingly important as we look to continue to maintain production levels. So all this is showing is the governor has had questions in the past about how efficient 3-mile laterals are relative to 2-mile laterals. And what you're looking at just in the 3-mile left-hand side, if half of our drilling rigs at 40 rigs were drilling 3-mile laterals, that's the equivalent of give or take 80 to 85 old, 1280 wells. And so 40 rigs with a large portion of those drilling 3-mile laterals gets us to where we need to be in that growth curve going forward. That's consistent with what industry has been saying. I stole this graphic from Enerplus in November. They do a similar type of analysis. You can see the bottom half is their 50 rig case, 40 rig case, and 30 rig case for North Dakota Oil. And they have it pegged as well, right at 40 rigs is that magic number to keep production flat. Anything above that, we've got some growth opportunities and vice versa.
But on this slide, on the Enerplus, are they factoring in the 3 miles in that? Is it the 40 rigs at 40 rigs, but a percentage of them are all 3-mile laterals?
Given their position, I would suspect that that's been modeled into their assumptions.
But they're not explicitly saying it here.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But we have to, because that's a 50%.
Correct.
50% increase
Yeah.
in linear production length. And how many days does it take to to drill a 2 mile versus the 3 mile? Is there a productivity gain there because of, is the last mile of lateral faster than the vertical and the curve?
So in my mind, 2 to 3 days extra for,
Right.
yep, that third mile.
2 mile well, Governor, is about 10 days on average, and 3 miles are 12 to 13. So
You get 50% more lateral with a third in terms of additional days. So there is a productivity gain
yes.
in terms of the actual time frame.
And same thing on natural gas, crude oil. So the production outlook with the price deck that we're looking at, and drilling inventory and all that, continuing to look fairly steady, right around that 1.3, potentially some upside to that in my base case before inventory and production starts to slide with the prices. One thing I want
Does that imply there that rail is almost out of the picture, or is there still what percentage of the 1.2, 1.3 that we've had going on in 2023 is going out by rail?
It's roughly 2 trains a day, which is 120,000 barrels per day. So it's about 10%. But you're correct. It's 100% elective. We're no longer in a position where they have to use rail. It's an elective only marketing decision.
And is the rail, those 2 trains a day, typically, where are they headed?
Almost exclusively to the Pacific Northwest. Yeah, there's some light sweet refineries that are,
Including the one in Spokane that was one time state of Washington trying to outlaw receiving oil by train.
and a very small percentage continuing to the East Coast as well.
And was it trying to outlaw a refinery that helped keep prices down and reduce global emissions for the state of Washington?
The one thing that I want to caution,
Where are they loading out from?
we still have 6, 7 facilities that can, it's typically the unit train
So they're
facilities.
not, so they might vary each week or each day where they're being loaded from?
Correct.
Can you bring us a map of what, because at one time I think we had 18 or 20 unit loading facilities. And maybe that's somebody else's job other than yours, Justin, but if we could, Reese or find the right agencies to figure out where was our peak for loading stations, how many have been retasked for other uses, and how many are still active.
Yep, I have all of that on the oil side. I don't know on the repurpose if there's some ag component, but I do have this ones that are still active. I have that mapped and I can provide that. So, yep. I want to.
I'm asking for 2 reasons. One is on the state tax equalization. I know that it came up because some of these, when they came in, they got valued really highly and they were a big payer of local property taxes. And then when they got discontinued, then some of those places that had built new schools and other things, hey, we were counting on that in perpetuity. So there was a quick peak and then disruption of that use. And I also know that some of the other ones we were thinking about repurposing for other industrial uses, whether it's, bringing iron ore to North Dakota, bringing, frac sand to North Dakota. I mean, there was places where some of those assets could be reutilized in other ways, but it might be good for our economic development teams to know where they're at when they're pitching companies to say that there could be secondary reuse of expensive infrastructure that's relatively new.
Yeah, those are, and I can get all that provided. On the oil prices, and again, I've got some words of caution here as we move into December and January. What you're looking at the top portion, it's the North Dakota discount to West Texas Intermediate. The November timeframe was $4.79. That's a very strong price. Historically, we've been in that $6 to $8 discount level. And then there's one thing I want to use just to set the stage for some foundation on what I'm going to show you in a moment. The top portion is 2 things. It's our average North Dakota price from the tax department. And then I've also put on that top graphic Flint Hills, which is a refinery, and they have posted prices for various crude grades, including North Dakota Light Sweet. The bottom portion is how those 2 prices differ from each other. And historically, Flint Hills was not always a great indicator of what we were seeing in North Dakota. However, if you look at that bottom graphic, the last 2 years, it's been actually a very reliable source. The difference between those two prices is extremely minimal, which tells me.
What happened?
I don't know internally what they did when it's just a posted bulletin they put out every day of what they're paying for various crude grades. But the accuracy level, if it's contracts based off of that or different things, but it's more reliable now than it ever has been. And the thing we have is daily information from them that we can now say, okay, we know December numbers or January potential numbers prior to them actually happening. So this is the caution coming in that when we see that shift from that November to December timeframe, all of a sudden we see that discount extremely different. And what was taking place, I'll touch on in a moment, but we're looking at a $4 to $5 increase in that discount in that December, January timeframe. And we'll dive into what was happening in the industry and what I think should be some optimism that will correct this here over the next several months. The other
I
thing,
saw that come through in one other report, and I'm really excited to hear the answer because we couldn't figure out what was going on. But did anybody anticipate this at all? I mean, because there's no trend line that would have said that was going to happen in December or January.
no, and you'll see in a moment what the strongest theories are for it. And you're right, no one saw it coming. The other thing I want to point to, this is from Oil Sands Magazine. This is a metric that we don't watch closely in the past, and now I'm becoming more and more reliant on watching this as an indicator. There's two numbers on here. It's a little difficult with the scale, but the light blue line, SCO, synthetic crude oil. This is a Canadian crude oil blend that is a light sweet. It competes against the Bakken barrel in the U.S. Midwest. If you look back over the last 2 years, synthetic crude oil has actually been at a premium to West Texas. It's been marketed and highly sought after by the industry. That was not always the case, but over the last couple of years, that has been the trend up until that November, December timeframe, where all of a sudden you see SCO, synthetic crude oil, drop well below WTI. And at SCO, we can correlate that, and it does have a direct tie to the Clearbrook marketplace as it enters the U.S., competes again against the light sweet barrel like we produce in North Dakota. And those two have both kind of simultaneously taken a strong dip relative to West Texas Intermediate. The system that most analysts and market gurus think is responsible for this is the Trans Mountain Pipeline. This is a system that has been in the works for over 10 years. It was privately owned. The Canadian government had bought it. Numerous delays over the last 12 or so years. In the October-November timeframe, there were some regulatory decisions made that looked like there was going to be a further delay. The system was supposed to be in service end of last year, beginning of this year. There was a market scare that this was going to be delayed for an extended period of time. They've since worked through that, but the Canadian oil industry, in anticipation of that line coming into service, had started ramping up production very strongly in that November, that year-end timeframe, in anticipation of this extra 600,000 barrels of capacity. When it was clear that that was not going to be readily available, all of a sudden the market reacted and started hammering prices and pressuring those discounts. The regulatory structure, even in the last number of days, has been corrected. The anticipation is in the next couple of weeks they'll start line fill with the goal of having that in service by the end of Q1. And so this is a strong market signal. And what we've seen happen, Clearbrook, Minnesota, there is pricing and futures markets out there. And all this is showing is the spread between West Texas Intermediate and the Clearbrook Bakken prices. And I have it just by dates. I grabbed the curves and I've plotted them here. In that September, October timeframe, Clearbrook was trading at a premium. Bakken crude oil was being traded at a higher price than West Texas Intermediate and Clearbrook. All of a sudden that news came out, and you can see the curve quickly flip down to that discount level. But with the anticipation of that system coming into service in that April, May timeframe, The market is correcting itself and anticipating we'll be back in that premium environment by the summertime. So there is some light at the end of the tunnel, but for the next month or two, as the tax department, those numbers start rolling in, I can't say officially, but I'm anticipating we see a drastic difference.
And the price would firm up again because the Trans Mountain, there's enough demand on the west coast for pulling all that synthetic crude to the west, which then reduces the competition for availability of what's going to show up in Clearbrook in northern Minnesota.
The expectation is a large portion of that Trans Mountain will be actually heavier crude grade, but that heavier crude grade will free up space on the other system. So it's the transportation networks will be less congested, and that congestion has always led to price discounts in the Canadian side. And so that with more space available, less congestion, the marketplace strengthens.
Because some of the heavier stuff that was competing for space going east is now going to go west.
Correct. Exactly.
And when it goes west, where's the actual endpoint of that? That map was a little small. I mean, is that coming out of Vancouver or where's that?
Right down in that area for export then.
And that could go anywhere in the world.
Yes.
But it's not being refined in Vancouver.
No, it's getting waterborne. And again, the expectation is largely heavy grade crude.
It might be going to
Asia or yeah.
the world's largest importer of oil and gas. China.
So again, a word of caution, but some optimism that the market appears to be correcting it in the near future. On the natural
For those
gas,
that aren't following along on the math, I mean, we're talking $4 or $5 a day times 1.2 to 1.3 million barrels a day times 10%. I mean, the income loss during these few months for the state of North Dakota is significant. Having that come back again is going to be really significant.
Paul, I was going to do that math, but
Good, please do.
yeah. So that outlook then for, you've seen earlier, the crude oil outlook, natural gas outlook, we're still continuing to work on the natural gas solutions. I'll touch here a little bit on some recent events as well. A few of these are just for, in reference, we continue to see that market share, Bakken, Canadian, on northern border pipeline system approaching that 90% level. When you look at the shippers on northern border,
Is that Trans Mountain, is there any gas capacity going?
no, completely independent.
It's all other, it's because that Trans Mountain is all, what's the capacity of barrels per day on that?
It will go from 300 a day to almost 900. So they're adding another almost 100,000.
So they're adding a DAPL sized capacity to it.
Yep.
Has there been increases in Canadian gas infrastructure that's allowed this to happen on this slide? I mean, if we're taking over the share on what's going on northern border, where's their gas going?
There's some Canadian LNG facilities that are in development and will be coming on soon, but there's also been some open pipe space that we've been displacing that gas along primarily the Trans-Canada mainline system for now, and then largely a portion of that will shift to LNG on the west coast.
LNG export.
Correct. Yep.
Is the US opening up any LNG exports, or is the capacity, or is the Biden administration still trying to block, or states trying to block additional export?
Oh, there is a very rapid expansion of LNG capacity in the Gulf Coast. I want to say doubling or tripling in the next 5 to 10 years. So that,
Of export capacity.
Yep. One thing we'll continue to watch the northern border BTU numbers. There's been a rate case filed by TC, and again, they did not put an 1100 limit on there, but they mentioned again that they have downstream risks if markets start to push back, and that's something we've known now for 4 years of that potential issue. So we continue to watch it. Industry knows, and to see what options exist to help alleviate that.
You've got 1100 as your baseline. Is that the cap on your heat value?
So the reason I chose 1100 in 2020 when they applied to have that cap, 1100 is what they came with. And that largely many of the downstream markets have 1100 caps on their systems that we interconnect with.
But on this line, does it show that it can still operate above that?
It can operate because today Northern Border has no BTU
limit.
Should mention that the WBI grassland system went into service in November. So that expansion is complete and operating near full capacity already.
What problem was that solving?
Egress for residue or dry gas out of North Dakota. So that was moving it from really the heart of the basin down into the Cheyenne marketplace. The other one, in October, the commission had put in a letter of support to FERC for the Bakken Express project. Quick update on this. Again, that's a $555 million. It's using all existing pipe, but there are a number of investments being made to upgrade compression in North Dakota in order to allow that incremental capacity to flow from Bakken receipt points to the Glen Olin area and then down the Bison system. This has been contested by some at FERC. You can see on this graphic, these are all the shippers that have capacity on the Northern Border Pipeline system. The two anchor shippers for that expansion project out of North Dakota was ONEOK and Hess. And then you can see the other intervening parties, some or most either taking an oppositional approach to it or having no stated position. And when I say oppositional, we've not seen any opposition to the expansion out of North Dakota. What the issue has largely been is in the replacement horsepower costs of that 347 million and how that's going to be allocated to existing shippers and their rate structure. So it's largely rate concerns and how those are being accounted for in their rate structure. So there isn't a wide held belief that this is going to be delayed longer than expected or that there's going to be any risk to the overall project and its benefits in North Dakota. It's largely just the accounting side at FERC of figuring out, okay, is this all being properly allocated? So when we look forward, again, still not saying this is a graphic we've used now for a number of years, just refreshed, looking at really the one major expansion on the horizon, and then those next stacks that we're going to need beyond 2026. So those options, again, I tried to be fancy here with the 5 C's, construction, compete in order to take additional space on some existing pipes, compression, which is expansions of existing pipeline systems, consumption within the state itself, and then in red, the undesirable scenario would be the contraction scenario. We've walked through a number of these in the past. How do these systems get developed? Shippers are, how do they get brought forward to the table? The one thing we've talked about, obviously, is that goal of going eastward and what that looks like. And so the first thing that with any of these projects, what does the market want? You can come up with all the project solutions you want, but if the market doesn't want it, it's a no-go. So what you're looking at, some of the latest pricing for natural gas hubs that influence what we have up here in North Dakota. Chicago, CIG, which is the Cheyenne market, Emerson, which is the Northern Red River Valley, Henry Hub for reference, and then Ventura, Iowa, which is the Northern Border Pipeline pricing structure. You can see again that seasonal movement with higher prices in the winter, lower in the summertime. And when we look at the marketplace, all three, Cheyenne, Ventura, Chicago, all very, very strong netbacks. And that's what, when we look at a potential new project, that's what it has to compete against and be competitive with potential expansions to those areas or competing for existing space to those areas. The other one I've included up there is that Emerson, Northern Red River Valley. We currently do not have capacity into that area. So we've looked at, again, how do those project economics break down? Currently, you're going to need a couple of things to make those happen. You're going to need a large system, large users, and large shippers to the tune of probably 400 to 600 million cubic feet of gas per day. A small project cannot get this done. And the other challenge is, what do you do with it once you get to the end? We've looked at this a number of times. It's been public in different open seasons.
So Justin, on that, you mentioned about the dramatic increase on the Gulf for export capacity built over time. Some of that was in response to, we have these wild differentials of like 10x the price for gas in Europe post Ukrainian war. How are they settling out this winter? And is there still enough price differential that, the export market or people, they're chasing a point in time that won't be there by the time their facilities are built, or what's
There's concern of that. The market has shrunk substantially as different LNG, not only in the US, but around globally has expanded. Australia, other different areas. So that market has gotten tougher, and there's been concerns that are we overbuilding out of the US?
but this winter hasn't created price pressure or opportunity in the US this year?
No, it's been a very mild, with the exception of the last couple of weeks here. For the sake of time, just going through this, it's looking like Viking blending, doing some of the math behind it, isn't an ideal scenario. So consumption in the Red River Valley is really that driving force that it's going to take in order to get a project this scope, that direction. That, and along with potential interconnects with the Alliance pipeline as one of those first steps. So again, Alliance, as it comes through North Dakota on its way to Chicago. Right.
Can you go back to that map again to make sure you find out which color you're talking about?
Yep, the purple system, sorry. It's the Alliance right through the center portion of the
Yep.
state.
And this is what you're trying to solve. You're trying to solve for this demand, legislature and other industry of saying, how do we get gas from western North Dakota to eastern
Yeah,
North Dakota?
and is there a stepping
Yeah.
stone process to make that happen? Right now, Alliance, counter to the northern border system, that is still largely a Canadian system. 90+% of the gas moved is Canadian. Very small percentage is North Dakota gas. And so looking at, are there opportunities that are attractive to the marketplace to start putting more and more North Dakota gas onto the system, and how do you make it competitive? They do have some capacity today. We're meeting again next week to look at expansion opportunities. So this is very fluid in how this is going to continue to move forward. One thing
On that intersection there, does that go by? I'm trying to see how close does that come to Jamestown? Or is that
it's right. Valley
Jamestown.
City is the closest that it goes by. Yep.
So Jamestown is above the N in WBI transmission?
Correct. Yep. North Dakota consumption. These are just a couple maps that I'm going to skip some of this consumption for now. This is just more of some tidbits of information of what we consume in North Dakota. We can dive more into this in the future, what the various sectors, some forecasts I have for some other consumption areas. What I want to focus the last bit of my time here on is what's taken place over the last couple of weeks with this cold weather event and some of the impacts it's had on North Dakota. You've likely seen news reports and different coverage on it. That is something Lynn and I have been working through daily as this event has taken place. So kind of a timeline of what took place during that. The first warnings went out by the pipeline systems themselves in that January 8th time frame. WBITC warning their customers to kind of start getting everything in order because when these events happen, they happen quickly, and you want to make sure you have adequate gas. The pipeline companies have no time to spare, that they need to make deliveries to those consumers immediately. January 11th, you can see the cold weather moves into the region, and the January 14th, 16th, line pressures and different concerns had already started to happen where deliveries weren't showing up that were expected, and operational flow orders, force majeures, curtailment started happening for a number of the North Dakota locations. And so how this works, if you're a gas processing plant in North Dakota, you're connected to 100 wells. All of those different operators, might be 12 operators, 100 different wells. You as the midstream have to work with all those operators to say, okay, what are you going to send me today? I have to aggregate that, and I need to send that to WBI or TC and say, okay, here's what I'm expecting. If there's a disconnect where all of a sudden I typically give you 100 million cubic feet of gas per day, wells are freezing up and there's operational issues and schedules, and now I can only deliver you 50. My facility will get curtailed at that level. They'll let me deliver what I can, but if there's upstream constraints, then I'm going to be curtailed until I can prove that essentially there's going to be gas to fulfill those needs. And the pipeline company will then go, okay, you're curtailed. We're opening that space up to someone else that can flow that day immediately. And so what we saw take place was Canadian Gas largely backfilling that lost Bakken gas. We saw well over 1 billion cubic feet of natural gas out of the Bakken get held up with freeze ups and operational issues. Canadian production backfilling that, a healthy chunk coming out of storage at the two facilities within the region. So from an operational standpoint, it was good. We did not have any deliverability curtailments. North Dakota citizens, North Dakota's businesses were all able to stay operational. We did not, there were parts of the country that had shortages and curtailments. We did not have that in the region. Pipeline systems did not have any operational issues. So it largely went as well as it could.
The Canadian storage that came online when we were curtailed, was that largely underground storage?
Correct. And perfect. You knew what I was going to cover next. And so those are those Canadian underground storage facilities that were then backfilling all of the systems you see in that bottom right map, keeping those whole. So it was the best that could be done given the circumstances. So some of the numbers that I've kind of through today, my estimate is from where we were at the end of December or early January, right around 4.9 million barrels of oil per day that have been kind of lost or deferred to 30 years from now, 13 plus billion cubic feet of gas. My revenue for just the state oil and gas tax revenue is around $30 to $31 million that this event impacted. So you can translate that to the producers and the royalty owners at 270 million. So this was not a small event. Largely now at about 70% recovery of.
Doesn't this make us want to be for global warming? Just a question.
It was challenging for sure from an operational standpoint. One of the natural questions is, we have natural gas storage here in North Dakota or in the Williston Basin. How did that interplay during these events? That system, we have North America's largest single natural gas storage field is in the Williston Basin, just in Baker, Montana is where it's essentially located in that map. The challenge with that particular facility is it doesn't have adequate, for events like this, it does not have adequate capacity to move gas out of storage fast enough. The pipes are the limiting factor. If you think of a giant punch bowl with a couple coffee stirrers to get out, it's massive capacity, just not enough pipe egress out or in during extreme events.
And who owns that Baker facility?
WBI.
And would they have an economic reason to have a larger extraction capacity when they see an event like this? They're not missing. I mean, is there?
We've talked about that many times. Their economic incentive will be shippers wanting that. So the market would have to say this is something we value enough on a routine basis to expand pipes in and out. And it's for these single events, some of the upstream capacity, it makes it tough to justify. We've looked at their storage as a potential solution for North Dakota gas until we can get some additional egress. Can we continue to store gas there for an extended period of time as new projects get developed? Those are other conversations, but it's a tremendous asset. I love that storage field. I think they've got a ton of potential for us, but it would take some certain strategic expansions to make it more valuable. So with that, I'll end here with any formal remarks, but if there's other topics that any of the commission members want to discuss, I'd be happy to do so.
Maybe this is for Reese and Justin, but is there, relative to the legislation that we've had, which was trying to drive legislative capital towards completing that west-to-east pipeline, then it was unsuccessful. Do we have anything outstanding right now that the commission is involved in terms of trying to get
governor's asking a lot of questions.
Trying to get the those dollars it was repurposed, or what remind me what the legislature,
So,
where we stand right
All
now,
right.
with their desire to put capital against that as an incentive.
Yep, so we still have the program in place. It's a line of credit, so we can participate in a project to Alliance or to, any number of potential solutions. So we are still having those conversations of how we can participate.
What's the dollar amount we have in that line of credit? that we have
30 million per year.
For X number of years?
It's indefinite right now.
Okay, so we've got, that's kind of this is like the Wyoming program, where we have the ability to show up as kind of a committed capacity to a project on behalf of the state to kind of front to help speed someone making that investment.
Correct. So if a project needs 200 or 300 million, we could come in at 100 million or some level of capacity. Yep.
There are, but nothing imminent relative. You're in conversations, but nothing imminent relative to market forces that are going to create that.
Correct. Okay. So that's, again, all I have for today.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, always great, Justin, reports, so thank you.
Yep.
And thanks for, especially for the more in-depth on the sizing of that, the January cold event. That's great.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you very much.
And from the commission standpoint, can we make sure that we've got that either Justin's slides or Justin's whatever with the OMB team that tracks revenue so that they can understand at this level too? And maybe the tax department, I mean, might be useful for you to spend an hour with OMB and tax and the treasurer's office just to go in depth to help all of the people that are crunching the numbers to sort of see what's behind this thing. Because I know there was some concern in those groups about, hey, what's going on with these discounts,
Yeah.
jumping up again.
Yeah.
That'd be useful.
I'll certainly keep that communication
Yeah,
going.
okay, all right.
Okay. Thank you.
step out for 1 minute.
Next, Karen, what do we have?
So moving on to the legal update,
Legal read.
we do not have the ag commissioner on the line right now, so if you're out of the room. Maybe right.
We'll start with when Drew comes back. Cool.
Is Doug back with us?
No, he won't
No,
be back.
no, he won't be back.
Okay.
So we're, next up is the item 3, Industrial Commission legal update.
So the first case we'll talk about is the core space litigation. No significant updates today. We're still stuck in a scheduling quagmire. We warned the court that if they allowed the Farm Bureau's intervention at the 11th hour, it would lead to scheduling delays, and that has come to fruition. And we're still working with the opposing side to hammer out what the next schedule is going to be. But we've got our arguments prepared, and we think they're in good shape whenever the schedule is set.
So under what basis was the intervention allowed?
We've got fairly lenient rules for intervention before dispositive motions are submitted, and they just intervened on the basis that they claim to have interests that will be affected by the litigation.
Did they identify specific landowners?
Not yet. And once we get the schedule hashed out, that is something we will be inquiring about. But other than that, no updates.
Maybe this is more of a question for Drew and the legal team, but wouldn't it be typical that you actually have to identify an injured party before you have an opportunity to intervene? But it seems like we keep running into these things in North Dakota where groups and associations that might speculate that they've got, that they, if with enough time, we can find someone who might end up have to be, adversely impacted. But I mean, so what it seems like we're slowing a lot of things down that might possibly be actually outside the realm of the way the legal system should actually work. Because usually if you're going to have a complaint, you have to have somebody who's been injured.
Yeah, there could be a broader critique of our rules in general, but I think at least as applied here, the default is to allow people who claim to have an injury to at least have a say in it. So the court erred that way in allowing them to intervene, and whether they actually have standing or injury is something we will now establish.
But I hope we could set a precedent that any membership organization, because membership organizations could be quite broad, and regardless of whether they're a year old or 100 years old, I mean, you could have a broad claim that, hey, some of our membership is injured, so please, slow down this thing. And we know that there are, as we say that, citizens against virtually everything, this sort of organization of we're going to stop things. That's maybe not completely new. That's been around. I mean, probably since they're building the railroads in North Dakota. So it is, but I'm just, again, in this case would be really interested if we can actually understand who's being injured is, I think, a key thing.
Yes, sir, and that is something we will work to establish, and if they do not identify people who have actual injuries for the challenge statutes, we will bring that to the court's attention.
And for the purposes of our team here, I mean, let's understand, we're talking about pore space. That's the topic here. And the way our pore space laws are that if your pore space is utilized, you get paid the same as everybody else. And so I'm really having a hard time understanding how injury occurs when everybody gets paid the same. And I would believe that actually when we have the pore space, you still have a say as a landowner. If you say, yes, I'll do the pore space, but no, I don't want to have an injection well on my property, you can say that.
If the basis on which we are trying to determine if they actually have impacted owners would be if there are owners who are being subjected to a forced amalgamation, we say, I don't want to participate at all. We're trying to identify if there are actually any members of these organizations who are in that bucket.
Who say, I don't want to get a check in the mail for doing nothing.
Correct.
Because if you're in one of these like 50 square mile areas and you could be 10 miles away from an injection well and have no loss of anything relative to your private property use, and your microscopic pore space 6,000 feet underground may or may not, because in some of these you get paid even if the CO2 doesn't reach your in the buffer areas, it may not even reach your land or your pore space, but you still get the check, the same as the people that are maybe in the center of that, correct?
That's correct. Governor, there's a couple of efforts underway to make some lemonade out of these lemons that were being handed. One is that EERC has done some work to aggregate the benefit to our pore space owners of the 250 million metric tons of storage that you've approved. And the low side economic estimate is a benefit of $300 million over the life of the storage projects to North Dakota landowners. That's the low estimate. 300 million
Yes.
is the worst it could be. The other effort is that
Again, for doing nothing.
correct. Yep, for simply being included in a storage facility. It's mailbox money, as we call it in the industry.
Well,
And
I mean,
it would also then increase their land value. So that includes just the cash payment you receive.
Correct.
But if you were to resell your land and your land came with an annuity of a annual check from CO2 storage, your land would be worth more, just the same as if someone was, you could still utilize it, the surface any way you want, but when you're selling your land, you would also have the ability to say, oh, but there's money attached to that ownership because that land represents CO2 storage ownership. So, I mean, from an estate standpoint, over that period of time would also, I mean, because 300 million of additional income against that land should be included in sort of an actuarial value of what does that do to increase the land within that storage space. So all that land is worth more too. So it is absolutely the low in terms of the cash, but there's another accrued value to North Dakota citizens in terms of if they were to choose ever to sell their land or however they want to think about it, decades down the line, it's really worth more.
So,
but I mean, that alone is not going to answer the question whether somebody is standing and says, I'm injured, I don't want to do any of this.
correct.
I don't agree with that argument. It doesn't make any sense. I mean, but
So the
I
other
mean, I
effort,
hope so.
Not wanting to do it and injury are two different things, aren't they, in the eyes of the law?
No, not always. They could, the injury could be that it is mine, you can't have it, I don't want anything to do with this, I don't agree with this development, and now I'm gonna be forced to participate in it, and I don't even think we should extract these minerals from the earth because they're doing ruinous damage to the environment. Now, just for the record, that's not my perspective, but I mean, that's what they're going to
That
do.
is
That's what
some
they're standing on, and it doesn't seem likely. And we've talked about it a lot. I mean, it's the same thing a lot of places. I mean, what percentage of people are able to offset other people's obvious and the society's obvious benefit? It'll seem like a ridiculous result, and it will, if it were to happen, it would not be the first one I saw out of a court, but you know, that's what we're going to be battling, and it is, and you're right, you push that issue along, Governor, and of course, it's going to be a central theme here, and of central importance. What is your injury? But we can't make value judgments. Value judgments alone won't make that assessment, because they say exactly that. I don't want anything to do with this. I think this industry is evil. This is my land. That is my property. You are forcing me to participate in something I don't want to. That's the essence of what we're going to hear from them. But yeah, I'm not sure how you have a country if that's what can be. That's what can.
Well, our
stop
country is
progress.
based on majority rule, not the tyranny of the minority. So, and hopefully the courts will uphold that.
I agree, but we can't vote ourselves in your car.
well,
I mean, I'll vote for it.
the other effort, gentlemen, that's underway is through the Interstate Oil and Gas Compact Commission. And that is to compare and contrast the resource model for carbon storage to the waste disposal model. And part of that is going to be how much better off landowners are if they go with the North Dakota model, which is the resource model, versus the waste disposal model. And we're going to be able to compare those because the existing project in Illinois is a waste disposal project. And the projects in North Dakota are resource, pore space resource models. So I think that'll be very helpful, especially since it'll be developed by a broad group, Interstate Oil and Gas Compact Commission, and and can be perhaps part of our argument in this case.
I know it may not be part of this particular CO2 storage legal case where we have not yet identified people who've been injured. But as we move forward, this is my understanding from people who've been attending, sessions, public sessions, listing the concerns of people. One of the concerns is there still is a view that that CO2 is a waste product. So this builds on sort of the Illinois model. And I think one thing we have from ERC is we got a long list of the value added uses of CO2, whether it's building materials, road materials, beverages, medical uses, welding applications, and the biggest one potentially for our state, using it for enhanced oil recovery. And so we've got it, it goes back to the educational effort of the project, which this commission is now undertaking with agriculture, oil and gas, and the baseload energy industry. Those three industries, all of whom benefit from having a thriving, successful regulatory environment for this valuable resource, CO2, its storage and its use. That is, it becomes even more pertinent, more urgent that we educate the public at large about this is a value-added resource, and these are all the benefits that could derive from that. So I know we're working on that. I know we got that kicked off to start, but in the meantime, I would hope that during the work on this case, where we're heads down on the legal issues, to understand that as people are out there trying to find people who object, some of the people at the public meetings last week that are objecting were saying, we can't be doing something like public storage for a single company's waste product, as opposed to this is a a value-added resource that has got value today, and it's going to have even more value tomorrow for beneficial use across a variety of industries. So we're fighting a lot of misinformation, and we got to win the battles in the court, but we've got a big job to do, because I feel like we're losing a citizen informational discussion right now, and we just got to do our part along with industry to make sure people understand all the uses.
Ready to move on to the second item. Item I is the quarterly federal lease sales. We have, so tomorrow, the BLM will file their status report for the upcoming hearing, which is February 9th. I will be here and be present for that. That's the one where we're going to question them on the process of how they managed to winnow 800 nominated tracts down to only 12 to be auctioned off in December, 6 in March, and a handful in the upcoming July sale. So we'll be working in Judge Trainer's court to try to get some answers to that and get some additional help from the federal court system to move that along. So,
and to be clear, we're talking about the first president since Harry Truman that's not held the required quarterly lease sales.
that would be true. Yes.
Even Obama held them every quarter.
Yes.
And when you go for this remarkable, from the 835 down to 12, I mean, we're talking about a process before where if 835 were nominated, you would nearly have 100% of them would always be auctioned off. I mean, it wasn't like we went from, we're declining half to now we're declining 95%. I mean, this is like clearly a ideological, political, driven from the White House through an agency approach to basically say, yes, we're going to try to find some way to say we're complying with the law when we really aren't. Because if you take 835 down to 12, it's basically still shutting the door, slamming the door on the American people, on the American industry, to do something that is legal and lawfully required.
It's required by statute, correct? And all 12 that were auctioned off in December got bids. It was a competitive auction. They all got more than one bid. The two high priority tracts went for over $20,000 an acre. So the federal government is just choosing to forego revenue, half of which comes to the state of North Dakota and half of that goes to the county. So we're all being harmed by this illegal action.
And did you put together an estimate, Lynn, for what you think might be the impact over 10 years on revenue to the loss to the state of North Dakota if the federal government keeps breaking the law?
I did, Governor, and I can't remember it at this point, but it's in the hundreds of millions of dollars of damage to the state. So
my recollection was it was over 900 million, but that I could be. It was in a footnote in one of your earlier reports.
I apologize for not having that number at the top of my recall. So again, hearing coming up
in the right neighborhood, which is this highly material cost to the citizens of North Dakota. And then the other piece, which I again know when you're back in Judge Trainer's court, the average citizen who's participating in we're going to save the planet by not developing minerals on federal land, doesn't understand that about the 2 and 3 mile laterals that we were just talking about, and the 4 mile laterals we're just talking about in this meeting an hour ago. I mean, we have an opportunity to send a check to the federal government for developing minerals on BLM land without ever setting foot on BLM land. I mean, there won't be one 2-track. There's not an oil pad. There's not a drilling rig. There's nothing on some of these federal minerals. We're literally, and then this is at a time when everybody's concerned about the deficit. So I do feel we have to break through on the perception that drilling equals surface damage, drilling equals environmental damage, but drilling equals permanent permanent wrecking of our environment. I mean, so, if you think that drilling is doing all those things, I mean, yeah, let's be against it. But with the way we're doing it, we're just literally helping the financial situation of the United States. And we're reducing dependence on countries that produce energy less cleanly. So you're stabilizing the world, improving the financial situation and improving the environment. I mean, what's not to like about that? So but we're, and again, this is by all rights, we should have won that. We've won this and we should have won. It shouldn't be an appeal of it because the law is on our side. If we're losing because there's political pressure and public pressure that thinks that what we're trying to do lawfully is bad, when in fact it's good, it's triple good, the way that we do it here, better, smarter, efficiently, and more cleanly than anyone else. So these cases take on even greater importance than the legal aspect because it's an opportunity again to tell the story of how we're doing it.
Agreed.
So good luck on the night.
All right. So from the regulatory standpoint, nothing has changed with the BLM resource management plan. We're waiting on the final to come out. We commented on it. On the EPA methane rules, we commented, they didn't change it. I think we're moving forward with litigating that with partners. Last week,
Who will take the lead on that,
um,
on the methane rule?
I think it's West Virginia,
There's been some discussion that it hasn't been.
finally decided. I think that's the direction we're leaning.
Well, they're all bad. I mean, it is our assessment that the methane rule is one that's actually just really trying to kill the entire industry.
It is, yeah. It's against the entire nationwide oil and gas industry. And so its impacts aren't as unique to North Dakota as several of these others. It's more regional, all of Region 8 is in the same boat. In fact, the entire oil and gas industry nationwide is in the same boat. And somewhat similar with the fee that EPA announced last week for methane emissions based on a CO2 equivalent. We've done some quick evaluation, but we're going to be faced with a challenge to try to challenge that fee as to whether legally they can even do it. But secondly, it's very harmful to the state of North Dakota. We've got 2,585 marginal wells with no gas sales. They produce about 30,000 barrels a day and support 2,600 jobs. And the potential is there that they become uneconomic, that they either end up orphan wells or plugged, and the resources that they will potentially produce gone forever. So, yeah.
And
So,
methane globally will increase because production that does not occur in the US will be replaced by other sources.
By production somewhere else. So we'll be actively helping provide information with regards to that. The Dakota Prairie Grasslands Travel Management Plan, we're working on an MOU with the Dakota Prairie Grasslands on that. The good news, the Securities and Exchange Commission withdrew the natural asset company rule proposal. So the pushback from Congress and private capital and from the states worked in that case. Still expecting this quarter, the BLM venting and flaring revised rule to come out. And then I guess that leaves the DAPL draft environmental impact statement sometime this year. It's the best that we can guess. So.
Have they changed any input on the timing of when the DAPL draft EIS is?
No, we've heard nothing of it. They haven't exactly ghosted us, but but something similar. We know that they're in Omaha. So, they don't take our calls, but we know where they are.
Sounds
And they have not indicated at all that they're going to indicate a preferred alternative.
Not right now. We're assuming that they're going through all the public comments right now.
Well, thank you. That's the legal and regulatory update.
Fed executive order, was there another one there?
Oh, that just has to do with, I always include it because that has not been revoked, and that's President Biden's executive order that says every federal agency should find a way to attack the fossil fuel industry through some type of regulatory or legal process.
Which is why you had the New York Stock Exchange involved and issue a proposed order on these natural asset companies. It's just a very unusual move, but driven by this.
Yeah, so
I'll
it,
come back again. We joined a letter on that. I mean, it kind of, someone has a feeling like it went away for 3 weeks or something and it'll come back. Yeah, they're always thinking.
That was a good
Karen,
letter.
from your long tenure in the securities side of environment, did you see fellow state securities commissioner, was everybody uniformly, or were there any states that thought this was a good idea?
We didn't see any other activity on the securities regulatory level. The rule was proposed in kind of a sneaky fashion, really. And I think that a lot of people just weren't aware of it. We had eyes on it because John flagged it. And so we were able to look at it from the standpoint of the preemption of state securities law, and no other state looked at that. So the Attorney General signed on to a comment letter that really looked at how the New York Stock Exchange and the Securities Exchange Commission had gone so far beyond the scope of their authority in proposing this. And then we submitted another comment letter that was really more focused on the impact on North Dakota, our sovereignty, and then the preemption of our ability to protect investors because we weren't going to be able to register these natural asset company shares as they were issued. So that was the approach that we took on the more North Dakota specific comment letter. But,
Well, collectively it had an effect, I guess, if they're
Yes.
withdrawing. So well done, team.
Yeah, so on the positive side, we have a really strong team that's watching these things and responding as they roll out under that executive order. More to come.
Yes. Well, thanks all for leading the pushback on all of that. Critical as we make the connection here between the impact on our citizens and our state revenues and the private companies that operate here, but also the impact on national security and the environment, opposite of what they're trying to achieve in both cases. Okay. Thank you, Lynn.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Phil. Thanks, Matt.
so
Okay, next up is Clean Sustainable Energy Authority. Reese.
Thank you, Governor, members of the commission. Starting off with the project management financial report for Clean Sustainable. We've included the updated org chart for the Industrial Commission in all of our reports just to show where Clean Sustainable fits into all of your managed programs. Also including the dashboard view of all of your funds that you manage, including CC within that. If we dig further into CC, the number I think that everyone's really interested in today is the amount of uncommitted dollars that are available for future grants. And that number is 21.8 million. Also showing our commitments, vast majority of those commitments, over 16.6 million, being to grants that are currently active and a small amount for administration. Funding sources for CC, I would note that with the exception of the federal ARPA dollars that was specific to hydrogen, funding source for CC has been from the general fund. And of course, the general fund gets a significant amount, over $450 million of biennium from the oil and gas industry. So we would argue that really all of this funding for CC is from oil and gas tax revenue that's being reinvested back into the industry.
I think I would ask that you check with OMB because that's the official number, which comes directly from oil and gas, but there's a lot of money in the general fund that comes from transfers from other funds, but those the other funds get all their money from oil and gas. So we're constantly understating the percentage of revenue in the general fund that comes from oil and gas, and people try to minimize that, but I just want to make sure that we're when we're laundering it through CIF or other things, a lot, I mean, most of that's all oil and gas money. So we should just try to be, because I think our estimates with transfers that we've included in the budget address have usually been, $1 billion, plus or minus $1 billion in the general fund that come from oil and gas.
Absolutely. So for CC, the total impact that we're currently calculating for the program, 17 cumulative projects, 14 of those currently being active, 8 being grants, 6 being loans. That cumulative value to the state of North Dakota, $5.2 billion of private sector investments that have now come to the state of North Dakota because of your CC projects that you've approved.
Fantastic leverage on this slide that you just, before you go back down on the, for the commissioners, the 21,899, that would be what's left if we approve today's agenda,
No, that's what you have available for today's.
starting at the beginning of today's.
Correct.
Okay.
And then we talk about as well the special project for fertilizer. So the legislature during the special session repassed a provision related to forgivable loan for specific to fertilizer projects. And they laid out some criteria what those fertilizer projects must meet in order to be eligible for the $125 million forgivable loan. Specifically, it must be a project that uses hydrogen produced by the electrolysis of water. And then I would also note that the legislation says upon completion of the construction, and how you define completion of the construction is really left to you as the commission to define that. So we have had some discussions at the CC board yesterday on how we would define that. And they have, you'll see in the motions today that they're proposing that the Bank of North Dakota work with the applicants, negotiate that, define that, bring that back to the CC board, and then of course, ultimately to you as the commission to approve the specific covenants within the agreements that would define completion of construction. I've also included in your packets just an update on all of your active projects.
Just on that thought, I mean, I would think that there would be, is we ought to take that assignment pretty seriously about the definition of completion. The most construction projects would have, if it has anything to do with residential, it's got a certificate of occupancy. So I don't know what the existing, shouldn't create a bunch of new red tape, but if there's any existing permits or county or city or state or, securing the water, securing the power, I mean, all of these things, and then actual production sold to a customer who's not a third, not an internal party. I mean, it can't be an internal transfer. I mean, I think those would all be markers that would be on it. There'd be a series of things on the checklist that would say this is what completion is.
Yeah, Governor, I'll see if I can maybe, and you're going down the exact same thought process that we've been having. So we've talked with both of the companies that have provided proposals, and we actually had another meeting with them this week to kind of talk through this. But that's, as we've talked through the evolution of it and in listening to the Clean Sustainable Energy Authority's thought process as well, it's exactly that of, there's that point where you have substantial completion and the AIA certificate is issued, and also at that point, it's okay, are there any outstanding liens, lawsuits, all of those sorts of things, are those cleaned up? And so that's probably one step. And then to your point, where is that determination once production has started that you say, okay, it's complete? Is that when the first molecule goes through, or is that a time period a little bit farther down the road? And so that's what we're going to work with the companies on this week to really kind of define out, and we'll bring that back to you.
Great.
The next page in your report is just an update on the active projects. I would make a note here. The first two projects on this list, Sarah Lawn and Wellspring Hydro, those two projects have recently been completed. And both will be recommended for consideration for their next steps today in your list of applications. And then lastly, in your report, you'll see a list of all of the applications that the CC yesterday voted And they voted unanimously on each one to bring a recommendation before you here today. 8 projects, 2 of them being for fertilizer. So if there are no questions on the report, I can start.
Just how many voting members on CC?
There are 9 voting members.
So you're saying all of these came in at a 9-0?
Correct. So as we start getting into the applications, I would just like to, just kind of go through a bit the vetting process that we go through at CC. I know it is pretty complicated and we use a lot of acronyms, and just wanted to help define some of that to help set the stage for what happened to get to this point. CC is by far the most vetted program of any of the grant programs we're aware of here at the state of North Dakota. We start with an application is received. We do an initial staff review just to make sure it is eligible for CC. We work closely with the Bank of North Dakota. The bank does a pretty robust financial analysis. We go through an independent technical review process where we find 2 to 3 experts in their fields. We put them through a process to ensure that they have no bias, no conflicts of interest. They sign an agreement and an NDA with us to confirm that. They will provide an independent technical review, and they go through a scoring process for the applications. We use that as our first tool. Then we go to a technical review committee of non-voting members of CC. They review it. And in this case, we also went through a pretty robust infrastructure discussion. So each applicant was asked to provide us more detailed information on their infrastructure needs for water, for natural gas, for power needs. We went through that with, we had Andrea Trapnick present, we had Justin Kringstead present, we had Claire Vigasop present. So all of these applications went through all of this before they even reached the CC board yesterday. And then, of course, each applicant has an opportunity to present before the CC board, make their case. Just to define these terms here, I'm showing up on the screen, the front end loading FEL stages. So most of the applicants, not all, but most of them will follow this kind of planning methodology. So when you hear us say FEL1, FEL2, FEL3, what we're meaning is FEL1 is when they're kind of in their initial business appraisal opportunity. FEL2 is when they start to define their project scope, start to do some of the validation studies, some of their basis of design, their initial work. FEL3 is a bit more robust when they start into their front-end engineering, actually starting the design work. And then stage 4 is when they're starting to execute, starting to actually do construction of the facility. So just wanted to provide that to the commission. So if you hear us use those acronyms, this is what it means.
But an applicant could be at any one of those stages, or
Correct. Absolutely.
you signal, is CC signal a preferred point at which they want to come? Can they come too early and come too late, or was there a sweet spot? Or
Typically, applicants have been FEL2 to FEL3. The CC has traditionally seen anything before that as too early and has encouraged the applicants to get further down the process before they would get approval. So starting on the fertilizer facilities. So the first applicant you have before you for consideration today is an application by Prairie Horizon Energy Solutions. It's a consortium of TC Energy and Marathon. They were applying for the fertilizer loan. This is a $2.2 billion project, would be a non-state cost share of 95%. They are proposing a combination of electrolysis by water and an autothermal reforming process using natural gas to create 73,000 tons per year of hydrogen by electrolysis, as well as 419,000 tons per year of ammonia. They quantified their CO2 reduction at 650,000 tons per year. What your independent technical reviewers showed.
the 73, that's so the 420,000 is anhydrous ammonia.
Correct.
Is the other 73 urea? Is that what comes out of that, or?
So in their presentation, they mentioned that they are looking into urea, but the urea number is not included there.
That's 73.
Oh, so all of this would be,
Hydrogen.
all of it's ammonia, but it's
Yeah.
generated by two different
Yes.
designs.
Yeah.
It's all ammonia.
Yeah.
Okay.
Governor, if I might just interject for a moment. You have a separate binder that has all of the CC application materials in it.
Okay.
Reese, or what you're presenting here, is that in these binders?
Yes.
Okay. So just wanted to point.
Because I was looking at the this one. Is there a different one?
Yeah, your
Your
second.
next
Second
binder
binder. Well,
there.
this has got each of them?
Right.
Okay,
Yes.
all right. Gotcha,
Just given the timing that CC was yesterday, it was.
gotcha. Okay, thanks, Karen, for pointing that out. Okay,
So the independent technical reviewer average score was 210 for this project. Your technical review committee scored it at a 41.75 with a recommendation of feasible with conditions. The conditions being that the commercial viability needs to be defined. We had already discussed, and CC agreed. Their vote. So they did vote to split the 125 between the two fertilizer projects. They felt that both projects were very strong projects. Both projects are strategic for the state. We would love to see both projects come to the state and invest here in the state and have two fertilizer projects. So we had a long, lengthy discussion on how that would work, and the proposal that the CC is recommending to you is that you would split the 125, 75 million to this one, and then 50 million to the second application you'll hear in a minute from NextEra. That way, both projects would have a significant investment, and hopefully we would get both fertilizer projects in the state. The conditions that they placed on their motion.
and then again, the 75 and the 50 in both cases are what we're calling a forgivable loan
Correct.
as opposed to a grant.
Correct. So in both
But-
cases, it would be the largest grants ever in state history that were.
And again, they're both post-production, so they have to build the facility. We'll define the terms of what completed construction means. And then at that point, the way the legislation reads is they are authorized to come to the Bank of North Dakota to receive a loan. We'll provide the loan and probably literally the next day turn around and ask SIF to repay that loan to the bank.
Say the last part, because we're not,
So
we
will.
give them the loan, but
We give them the loan, but then the way the legislation and we, in our
You'll ask,
conversations with the legislature.
you'll ask SIF to repay the loan.
Yeah, it's authorized for SIF to repay the loan. So essentially what we've said is we're going to make the loan on one day and ask for repayment the next day.
But they're asking for the repayment
From
from the state of Dakota. So they get the loan.
They get the loan and then the Bank of North Dakota gets the repayment from SIF.
So it's
So
a grant.
It's a grant. Yes, it is a
There's no
grant.
conditions or anything for it?
Yeah, there will be. That's what we're talking about is we'll have conditions on what does it mean to be in production and what's completed.
Essentially, it's a
Within
post-
24 hours of the loan going out.
Because it's post-production, so they have to meet all of the criteria before we issue the loan.
So it'll be built and operating and performing. So it's a
Yes.
post-production grant.
That's
Essentially
that's a
what it
good way to, put it.
And of course, SIF is paid by oil and gas taxes and state-owned mineral royalties. So once again, paid by the oil and gas industry. Next project for your consideration is the NextEra Spiritwood Fertilizer Project. $1.2 billion project with a non-state cost share of 90%. The process that this project is proposing is slightly different than the previous one, where they would use, they're more focused on the electrolysis process than using an air separation process to create their ammonia. Their CO2 reduction, they've quantified at 190,000 tons per year, with a production of 100,000 tons per year of ammonia via electrolysis. Your independent technical reviewer scores were 178.5, and your technical review committee score was 39.1. Feasible with conditions, the same conditions as the last project. And CC once again agreed with those conditions. Unanimous vote for a recommendation for a loan of $50 million, subject to the same covenants as the previous one that those metrics will be defined by the negotiation with the bank and then reapproved by you, Larry.
And so this produces about 1/5 as much fertilizer. Was that a factor in why they chose 75
That
grant
is
for one and 50 for the other? Was just the scale of
that is
actual
the
production?
factor, yes.
Because the legislative intent is fertilizer for North Dakotans. And both projects intend to sell their fertilizer in North Dakota, make it available in North Dakota.
Yeah, there was some discussion on what their offtake agreements were, but that is the understanding that it would help the local markets.
Okay. Which, and that's the whole, the meta thing, we're talking about clean, sustainable, but part of what was driving this special piece of legislation is that we ship natural gas out of the state, convert it into fertilizer, and then ship back fertilizer back the same way we ship out natural gas and then import propane back into the state to dry grain and heat homes and do all kinds of other stuff. So in spite of being an energy rich state, we just don't have the value added. So part of what we're trying to get to is to be utilizing our resources here for creating the end products we also use here. This is this tie between energy and ag that we're trying to connect. Okay. Right. Do you want to go
Considering,
through all of these, or do you want to, how do you want to take these, Reese,
So,
from what standpoint?
The draft motion we have for you would be a one motion to take them all.
Okay.
But if you prefer to take them all,
No, we're happy to do it the way you guys are recommending.
I think Commissioner.
So moved.
Okay. Doug, are you back?
yeah,
You can
I
motion to
was
that.
going to interject on one thing concerning the previous conversation. Geography plays a role in all this too, and the ability, when you look at infrastructure and available CO2 to convert ammonia to urea, is another factor that I know I've discussed with both companies. So I'm comfortable with where we're at. I know it's a little strange the way this is all done because ultimately in the end, it's a grant. I think what makes this one just slightly different than all the rest, these guys actually have to produce something before they're able to exercise that and receive, in a sense, the grant. So a little bit different animal than what we've gotten in the past, but I like all the projects that were put forward and supported by Clean Sustainable. So with that, Governor, I would move all the projects.
Okay, we got a motion. Maybe we'll hold on the second until we get to hear the next 6 projects, but appreciate your interjecting with that.
You bet.
All right. In addition to the 2 fertilizer projects, you had 6 other projects for you for consideration. Your third project is related to Green Pig Iron Production Facility co-located with Coal Creek in McLean County. This would lead to a CO2 reduction of 1.6 million tons per year. So putting into perspective, the low carbon pig iron that they would be producing in their application, they noted that 0.1 tons of CO2 per ton of iron versus a traditional pig iron process of 2.3 tons per ton of iron. So they have a significantly lower carbon score.
I mean, they're basically would be the first in the world of carbon negative pig iron,
Correct.
which then could become the lowest carbon intensive steel. We could end up with a steel plant in North Dakota if we get this pig iron thing going.
Correct. And the committee talked about the synergies with Rainbow Energy, with Coal Creek, with our geology, the really unique opportunities we have with our geology that no other state really has. So really is a great opportunity for them to come here in North Dakota.
Our geology, yes. Our geology is only accessible if we can defend the stable tax and regulatory environment that we've created, which allows us to lead the nation and the world in this industry, which, as we talked about during the legal thing, is being challenged right now. But that this is a if CO2 storage from the existing stuff was worth 300 million a year on the low end, you throw in these projects from this, I mean, we should just be tracking these all together. I mean, each time we do a CO2 project, the CO2 storage project as part of Clean Sustainable, we ought to be adding to Lynn's total of what that total number of annual revenue going to landowners is, because this could be, when we talk about, getting to the highest GDP in the nation, part of that is having sources of revenue for our landowners where they don't have to do anything. I mean, we're accessing this underground gift of geology for people that maybe didn't even know that they had. Yeah, I'm like, oh, we missed out. We don't have oil and gas on our land. Oh, we won the jackpot. We've actually got ability to store, to do, underground storage under our land. And so anyway, this one super excites me, the Scranton thing, and this is a complete gift that we're getting from the state of Minnesota. Because the ore that they're planning on processing at this plant is 63% iron ore. It's some of the richest in the world, and got to get it over here. And at Coal Creek, I mean, there's no pipeline required here. I mean, they'll be storing it directly underground where they're doing the processing, just like they are for Coal Creek or, you know, the Minn Kota project or any of these others. I mean, it'll be, or like our two Blue Flint and Red Trail. I mean, they'll be storing them on site. So this is a super exciting one.
You know, the other part that plays into this, if you're thinking about that bigger overall picture, so this plant would use 63 million cubic feet per day of natural gas. And they can also replace their natural gas and burn hydrogen. And so we've also connected them up with some of our proposed hydrogen production folks to figure out, is there a synergy there, and can they just, you know, pull the hydrogen in? So, you know, the other part of this is then it also may be one of those things that if we're trying to bring a pipeline from west to east, and you need to bring natural gas down into that area, this would be a major consumer.
Yes, and if we can, we know that we didn't talk about it today, but we have it almost every other meeting. Given that our gas oil ratio keeps increasing, that we're going to run into an export constraint out of state on natural gas. If we can use the natural gas here for value added projects that have all these revenue streams associated with them, and, you know, employment, CO2 storage fees, contribution to the local economy. I mean, all of the things that happen when you get a $2 billion pig iron facility that could be followed by a $5 or $6 billion steel plant. I mean, those are game changers for central North Dakota in ways that we haven't had since the coal industry started. This would be, you know, bigger and more impactful than all of that. But you do all that, but then we also save the oil and gas industry because we're using the natural gas to power value-added manufacturing. So there's so many wins stacked up on this one. This is like beyond win. There's like, I just keep on winning on this one.
Yeah, I think it was Joel Brown, one of the voting members on CC, made a comment yesterday. The first meeting of CC in 2021, our natural gas production as a state was 3 billion cubic feet a day. Today, it's 3.4 billion cubic feet a day and growing.
Yeah.
So great opportunities. So this one was a recommendation for a grant of 7 million that would support their FEL2 to start their process.
Yep.
Next one, Wellspring Hydro. This is a project that would you may be familiar with from their previous projects. They're moving on now to FEL3. Their previous project that just finished up was their FEL2, so they're still moving forward. So excited to see that still moving. They would be recycling produced water from the oil and gas industry rather than injecting it and disposing of it in saltwater disposal. The goal would be to scale that up to extract industrial products, useful, beneficial reuse products from that produced water. Their initial phase would be 150 tons per day of chlor-alkali materials that could be sold into an industrial market, or 175 tons per year of lithium that could be extracted from the produced water. Of course, very important for battery manufacturing. The recommendation from CC was for a loan of 2.5 million to support their FEL3 efforts to keep that project going. Next one is Marathon expanding their Dickinson Renewable Fuel Facility to include sustainable aviation fuel. It would expand their capacity by 90% and lead to a 20% reduction of carbon intensity of their facilities. This project would support FEL3. And the recommendation from CC is for a grant of $3.3 million to support those efforts. Next one is Dakota Lithium. They would have a demonstration project and a scale up of a new technology for lithium ion batteries. And these batteries, by the way, are not small batteries. These are large scale batteries. Like you could store power for an entire grid and power an entire grid for several hours while we work through grid processes. That's the type of scale they're talking about here. This recommendation would be for a grant of $2 million. Another synergy that was discussed between this one and the next project, Grand Power, CC did discuss some synergies with the applicants and our rare earth element potential in North Dakota. So both applicants are interested in that potential. And once they're scaled up and we start to scale up our rare earth potential in North Dakota, there could be great opportunities for providing feedstock to these entities with our North Dakota rare earth to build these batteries. This project with Grand Power, this is in Fargo, looking to build a large battery manufacturing plant. And these batteries they're producing, they would have 10x the life cycle of current batteries on the market. They already have contracts in place with the Department of Defense, so Navy in particular, very interested. You can power, for example, drones rather than on a scale of hours, on a scale of like maybe a day or two with these batteries. Recommendation here was for a loan of $17 million to assist with their constructing and scaling up of this plant in Fargo.
Isn't Packet Digital, they're building, part of the reason why they've got the extension of the lifespan is because they've already got the proven software which they've embedded on chips. And so they're basically a tech company that's figured out a way to use really sophisticated, super rapid on and off switching that saves battery life. So they're extending the life by actually just not using power when you don't need it.
Yeah, it is. That's a great definition of what they have done. And, I think what's really interesting about this project, and, as you saw from the slide, it's about a $56 million project. CISA's recommended a $17 million loan. We're also coordinating with them with a lead financial institution that would provide other debt financing that would be more at market rate. But then the other part, and you probably know a lot about Packet Digital, is that, they have some great relationships. And so they have received funding from the Navy, from a lot of defense industry contractors. They've built those relationships. And so in addition to what we're investing as a state, they have what I would consider federal matching monies coming in to move this project along, because it's really part of the onshoring effort to not build batteries and drones in foreign adversaries' countries.
Yeah, the DoD is very interested in this. And then on the loan portion of this, when the CC says we're doing a loan, is there a direct handoff to BND or then BND?
Yeah.
Do you have a separate portfolio for tracking CC loans, or how do?
Yeah. No,
Will that land in our legislative directed?
Yeah, it lands in our legislative directed. And so, these are separate. On this one in particular, and what we've done on the others is, we will coordinate with Packet Digital to put the loan together in coordination with the lead financial institution. And, in this case, it'll be, we'll issue the loan of the 17 million. We'll buy 100% of that back. And then I'll go into the Clean Sustainable Energy Authority fund, if you will. So it receives that 2% interest rate. And so we'll work with the bank and with the company to figure out what do those terms look like, and, length of loan, all of those sorts of things. So this will be a kind of a coordinated effort as opposed to maybe what we're doing with fertilizer, which we'll bring back to you to look at that one in more depth.
The last project for your consideration today is Saralon. This would be to support their FEL3. Their last project through CC was for their FEL2, which they have since completed. This would lead to a CO2 reduction of 2 million tons per year. Of course, their natural gas to liquids facility, major user of natural gas, very strategic for the state. 240,000 to 280,000 MCF natural gas per day. So significant opportunities there. And they showed us samples of some of the materials they were making, like diesel alternatives and things like that, that aren't as aromatic, that wouldn't have as much of an environmental impact if it were spilled, that wouldn't have the gelling issues of traditional diesel. So not only a large user of natural gas, lower carbon products, but products that can be technically, better than the products that are currently on the market.
But when you were saying earlier, for 3.4 billion cubic feet a day, and this is, 240 to 200, this project is one of the largest, and it wouldn't even use up, 8% of our daily capacity per day. But by the time they build it, we'll be at 3.5, 3.6.
Yeah, I think their hope was by the time that it's built and they take this to full capacity, they would take about 15% of the daily production of natural gas for the facility.
Of North Dakota, which would be,
50.
That would be awesome. In terms of helping us with the, because because then this is capital here versus it going into a pipeline that sends that someplace else.
as Justin Kringstad says, we need about 3 more of these.
Yes. And then remind me in the legislation, is there a cap on the amount of loans that CC can do? Or is the cap only on the grant side?
So what they have done with the loan side, the revolving loan fund that's been created is at 420 million. And so, so that's their max that they can loan out. We've actually already started to see some that's in. I think we've got about 800,000 that's rolled back in already from a couple of the projects that we've done. And, we are waiting, anticipating that, the big loan obviously is going to be for Project Tundra. Or that project that's
Formerly known as.
Yeah, exactly. Haven't come up with a new name yet.
Project Minn Kota. just call it
Okay,
that.
Project Minn Kota. And so that one was approved for a loan of 250 million.
Yep.
And we anticipate that, the way that's moving, that we would anticipate they would draw somewhere in the first or second quarter of this year on that loan. And so that will be, one of the most substantial loan to go out. So at this point, we just have Balance and Cirlon that are 2. We do anticipate them, and then also Rainbow was approved for 45 million that will probably be going out here this summer as well.
And we've got the capital to make those loans.
Yeah. Yeah. So the way that the process is working, to not confuse this, but what the legislature did was put a line of credit in place with the Bank of North Dakota. And I'll just use Project Minn Kota, for instance. So when Minn Kota says that they're ready to start drawing on that line, let's just say they're going to draw 50 million. We will draw 50 million off the line of credit at the Bank of North Dakota. That will go over into the Clean Sustainable Energy Authority fund. And then from there, we will fund that loan out to Project Minn Kota. The line of credit with the bank is to be repaid by the legislature. So that's been the conversation, is this is a cash management tool. Instead of parking $400 million in a fund and waiting for it to go out over the course of a couple of years, they're using the line of credit. And then we've worked with them to say, okay, like last session, they paid down the line. There was just 30 million out, so they paid the line down. So as we go to the next session, then depending on what we have out, they may repay the entire line, or we may, kind of term it out over the course of a couple of bienniums. So we do have the capital to fund the loan program.
Then the revolving loan program would live on.
It stays on
inside
its,
of-
it stays over on its side of the balance sheet.
Okay.
Yep.
So if you do approve every project before you hear today, you would have $99,000 remaining for grants. So almost all of your grants would be allocated, and then 218,000 remaining in your kind of loan fund. So it would be just about everything you have available, you would be allocated today, but that would lead to $10.5 billion of private sector investment in North Dakota just with these projects here.
And we're 7 months into the biennium and we're already out of.
Yes.
I think the executive budget asked for more. I'm just recalling that.
If I recall, I
think the next one will. too.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have a motion from the commissioner, and we have a second from Drew. Any other comments or questions? Thanks for the great review. And also say thanks to everybody on the, for Reese and the team, sort of managing the process and putting it through, but also I know that the Clean Sustainable Energy Authority takes this really seriously, and their 9 members has been really diligent in driving through this thing. And it's great that they've come through with 9 recommendations across these 8 projects. So we'll call for the vote.
Commissioner,
Yes.
Attorney General,
Yes.
Governor,
Yes. Motion carries. Okay, thank you. Transmission Authority is,
Yes, Claire's on.
take it away, Claire.
Good afternoon. How are you doing? Governor and members of the commission, Karen asked me to talk a little bit about the recent weather event, and you have a report I put into your booklet there, I guess. In the world of RTOs, there's a continuum of alerts from normal grid activity to weather advisory, resource advisory, so on. And to emergency levels, 1, 2, and 3. During this event, we were only in the advisory levels for both of the RTOs, and we came through it pretty well. The reasons being that we didn't have the generator outages that we had in the previous cold weather events, and maybe another critical component is improved forecasting. I know, for example, SPP forecasts wind out 7 days, so they have really upped their forecasting models and efforts, and that was very helpful. Those cold weather advisories provide instructions to the generators and the transmission operators, so there's a lot of communications between the generators and the RTOs to make this successful. The other element is that there are imports. For example, SPP imported 6,800 megawatts from their neighbors that helped them out, and that speaks to the need for solid transmission and interconnection ties as we move forward. So we're all rightly concerned, but we made it through this one pretty well. Reese, I'm having trouble sharing my PowerPoint, but maybe it'll go now.
Here, do you want to share your screen, Claire?
I hit share.
Gotta try again.
It's just going to an email. I don't know what's happening here.
I'll share my screen and I'll go through your slides for you if that works.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Sounds like a good plan. Thank you, Reese.
Yeah, thanks for saving me, Reese. So, Reese, you're awesome. Yeah, if you could go to the first slide or the second slide, please. I guess that is, yeah, that is the second slide. Or the first slide here, it's another Mother Nature thing. There was, as you know, there is significant ice accumulation in the eastern part of the state, and I'm not going to talk about distribution, but that's where most of the problems were, just because that's lighter duty infrastructure. The transmission is built heavier, and that makes sense because grid reliability starts with generation and then moves to transmission and distribution. So if you don't have a stellar transmission, it doesn't matter how much you have invested in distribution, the lights would still be off. So that speaks to why the transmission is just built tougher. Next slide, Reese. So the other interesting thing that I'd never really thought about it before, but all of our transmission cooperatives and investor-owned utilities and transmission line owners are involved in eastern North Dakota. That's the way the power flows. So next slide. There was minimal impact on the transmission, and I put that, there's a written report that Reese and Karen put in your book as well, but primarily it was cross arms, insulators. Minn Kota did lose 60 plus poles on their lighter transmission, 69 kV system. That's the more rural transmission system. And there was one 345 kV structure that went down between Jamestown and Buffalo. Like, for instance, there was a number of trip events, and those events happen when the ice starts shedding, the lines start jumping and maybe touch each other, and that creates trip events, and that is concerning to the generators too. For example, Rainbow Energy's DC line, when the ice was shedding, was creating trips on the transmission, but that goes back to generation. So they had some hand-wringing hours running those things through. Next slide. in reviewing, I visited with every one of the transmission owners, and I came up with 3 words: collaboration, cooperation, and technology. Otter Tail Power, if they had not had their 2 fuel oil peaking generators that they have in Jamestown, Jamestown would have been dark for quite a period of time, but they were able to keep the power on in the Jamestown region. And then collaboration between Otter Tail and Minn Kota Power, that wouldn't be a normal process to ask your neighbor to help you put the 345 structure back up, but just Minn Kota and Otter Tail's mutual concern of getting the system back as reliable as possible, as fast as possible, they work together to do that. So, and then the cooperatives have mutual aid agreements. So cooperatives from around the region went to the help of the Eastern North Dakota cooperatives. And then the last thing that I thought was just really neat was the use of eyesight drones, especially in the Stutzman County and Barnes County area. They were able to quickly, the Otter Tail Power used these here and was able to quickly assess the line in places that are difficult to travel. And this was one of the pictures that they were captured and could understand what they needed to do to get it fixed. So hats off to our utilities and cooperatives for their collaborative spirit and cooperation and the use of technology to get the transmission system on quickly. Next slide. Are there any questions about that?
All good. Keep going.
Okay, the next topic is the DOE or the IIJA Grid Resiliency Grant. As you know, you approved us applying for the first 2 years, 2022 and 2023, and we received those monies in May. We solicited subawards, which you approved and at your December 23rd meeting. And now we just got notice that we can apply for fiscal year 2024. And this application window is only open for 90 days. So we need to know from the commission whether you would like us to pursue the next round. It's a formula grant, so it's ours for the asking, and it amounts to $3.8 million. There's a little caveat here is that the state, if you remember, the state needed to match 15%. And our earlier grant application was during the time of the legislature, so we were able to ask the legislature to approve that 15% match. At this time, we won't be able to do that. So maybe Reese, you want to talk about what we visited about with the Emergency Commission?
Sure. So,
And the next
fellow
slide.
commission members, what Claire and I are really asking for today is your approval for us to apply for the next tranche of the IIJA Grid Resilience funding. So it would require a 15% match. Last time around, we applied during a legislative session, so we were able to get the legislative authority. This time around, we would need to apply, obviously outside of legislative sessions. So our request is that you would give us that authority to apply. But with the understanding that if we do receive our award from DOE, we may need to go to the Emergency Commission and ask for legislative authority to accept the federal funds and get a 15% match.
Well, I'm all on board on that, so we'll entertain a motion to do that.
Moved.
Second. Yeah, I think that's, and I don't know if we think these are coming annually and we think they're coming annually this time of year, then I would also just maybe ask that in your budget request for the transmission authority that we anticipate that, and we put in the budget for the transmission authority the ability to do this. You know, if there's a federal grant, contingent on a federal grant application up to 15%, just so we have it in there, and then we wouldn't have to do you would have to do the EC thing in 2026. If we think if they're a formula and we know they're coming, let's just get ahead of it, because this will get approved by Emergency Commission. So let's just get this in front of them as quickly as we can.
Absolutely. I think we'll have to ask DOE, Claire, but I know this time around whatever formula they used, they didn't give us the exact numbers until recently. So we may not know the exact numbers for the future, but I think we could get like a general number.
If you have a trend, I mean, it's rounded up to the nearest 100,000 above that, and put that in the budget, and then we'll go from there. I mean, this is, invest $1, get 6. But hopefully we're smart enough to do that.
That's all I have, I guess. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Claire. Thank you.
Vote,
Okay, we'll vote.
Attorney General,
Yes.
Governor,
We've never had a tie vote before. Okay, yes. All right, we have North Dakota Housing Finance online.
No, they're all.
You probably elevate worship on you if you had some real controversial issues going on.
all in there.
Yeah.
Popular leadership.
Aaron, when did you start?
December 4th. December 4th.
Yeah. What were you doing prior?
I worked for the city of Williston.
Well, that's right. You were doing finance work up there. Is that what you were?
I was an admin for the building department.
Okay. Dave? Hi. Okay. Pat? Where's Pat going?
Yeah, go right here.
Doug's not here.
Doug's not here. All right.
You can be the acting.
You're online, but it's not on right now, so.
No, if you don't mind. Sorry. Thanks. Thank you. Appreciate that.
What can you do?
You should have never asked John.
Yeah.
All right, ready to go?
We are ready to go.
Okay. First up is document for you to sign, Governor, and permission to approve for appointment of public hearing representatives. If you remember, we used to have to do this every time we do current tax credits, et cetera. Kutak Rock, our bond counsel, said we could do one of these in perpetuity and have the red tape coming back at you.
Love red tape production.
So there you go.
I did ask Karen, I said, I don't think in the history of the industrial commission, one of these has ever been not approved.
Yeah.
It's probably pretty safe to give you a continuing authority.
Okay.
Let's go crazy with all that freedom out there.
Well, as long as you're still here, we'll go with it.
Oh, is he going somewhere?
I heard a rumor. I don't know.
The attorney general is going to try to rescind my.
He's the legal mind, so.
And the highway patrol already informed me yesterday that it was not legal.
So I told him afterward too, I said, if I gave anyone the impression that I would support either decision, wrong. That's not, do I see this at all?
Okay, so we're, do we have a, is this, the attachment 10 is the motion to, move us from having to appoint the hearing officers every time it comes up. This gives the authority for you guys to, but it's not by person's name, it's
Right. Position.
by position within the housing authority. You guys can choose who's the hearing officer for these various events.
Correct.
Wow, because that's so it's transferring a lot of power here.
Yeah.
We're gonna allow them to do
Oh,
their
so
job.
moved.
They can do their job without asking permission.
That's why we run our
It's
office.
crazy. Second, call for the vote.
Attorney General.
Yes.
Yes. Okay, Ryan, can we add this to the tape production?
Okay, that's an easy one.
Yeah, we go.
Okay, next up, talking about doing our job. Kayla and Brandon are going to talk about, you'd asked at our for the December meeting, we give you a report on our bondage.
Yes.
For the last decade, and we thought we'd wait until today with Pat being
Historian was
here.
here.
The historian is here, yep. So I'll let them take over.
Yeah, so we'll have a lot of credit to owe to Pat for really what we're presenting here, right? So I'll start off with what we've got on the bonds, and then Brandon will talk about the servicing side. But high level, this is kind of just to tell the story of what's happened here the last 10 years. And as you can see, one of the highlights that we want to point out is that in 2022, the Housing Finance Agency issued the most mortgage revenue bonds per capita in the U.S. for all housing agencies. So kind of a big deal for us when we go and meet with other states to tout that a little bit. Dave likes to throw his white hat and make sure it's a point. So, but you can see here, so we've done it by fiscal year. We did the last 10 years in total for the dollar amount of bonds issued. We're just over 3 billion, which is a good number for us. You can see that we've slowly increased, starting, around the 150 billion range. And now we're, at the, or I guess 275 million we just did in the last 6 months. So overall, steady increases, and about 300 million, I would say, a year is kind of where we're at right now. This includes both the taxable and tax exempt bonds. So we lump them together to kind of give you less data than too much. Next, you've got our average bond yield. You could see, for the most part, we carry a pretty nice yield, which allows us to offer the nice interest rates to our borrowers, really. One of the things to point out, I would say, is in 2020, 2021, you can see the decrease in the yield given COVID and how the Fed, changed interest rates. And then slowly we've started to tick up. Where we're at now is about the last 6 months, 4.53. So you can see the increase. Things are actually going down. I had a call today about current pricing, and right now a yield would be about 4.25. So that's where we're at. Total number of loans purchased over the last 10 years is just over that 16,000 amount for home buyers that have been helped, I guess, with our program. And then the other thing that I just want to point out here is the down payment assistance that we've provided over this timeline, which is close to 90 million. A lot of down payment assistance. So really, I guess something that we're proud of. And Pat has set up a really good program along with Dave and Brandon, really the whole team. So we're just keeping it going. But that's where we're at on bonds, and I'll let Brandon kind of talk about servicing.
Yeah, so Governor, you had the big question of what is our market share with the lenders that we use. So we kind of pulled some data there, and some of this is it's a little gray and a little misleading. So there's 108 total lenders in the state. Granted, there's a lot of small town lenders that they can legally do loans, but they're not going to use our program. They're doing it mainly, ones that are keeping in-house. So those are ones that aren't going to necessarily use our program. However, a lot of them are familiar with our program, and they use other providers of our program to actually do loans to them. So in a roundabout way, they are kind of still using our program. But, based on that, we have, market share of about 71% of the lenders in the state that can use our program are using our program. You've got some trust companies out there, and you've got some other, brokers out there that just have other products. They don't want to use our product for some reason. We do try to wrangle in those big fish every now and then, but some of those, they just don't go for it. And then also down below shows our servicing portfolio over the last 10 years, how the significant growth over the last 10 years. And we also did pull some Home Mortgage Disclosure Act data that lenders have to provide on a yearly basis, just showing kind of what our market share is, what we buy per year. And those numbers down in the bottom right are just loans that would fit into our category of loans that we can buy. So just an example, in 2022, there's probably about 14,000 loans done in the state. But of those, about half of them would qualify for our program. So it shows we've got, that number there, 25% market share. It doesn't look huge, but when I pulled the data on other lenders, we were the most market share in the state. The next closest was Gate City at 16%. So that's fairly significant.
Well, it's fantastic. So, and I'm glad you pulled this together. Hope this was informative for you as well. The data is impressive. The records are impressive. I think it would be useful, again, because I find that our legislature and the public do not know what this agency does. They don't understand the impact and the great work that's going on. And some of this would be, all of you are in their jobs because you enjoy and are at ease with numbers. And by that, I think if you could translate some of this graphically, put it on the website, show the growth, show the impact, show the 90 million in savings. I mean, show number one in America. I mean, I think there's a little bit of self-promotion. And even as you think about the strategic planning process, you'll be joining us for when we've got the templates there, then some of those templates there, which are inviting people to share stuff graphically, then those have led into great one-pagers to use with the legislature, because we just want to get better and with, term limits won't have an impact necessarily right now, but we're going to get to a point where we have higher turnover. And there are a number of legislators that are not going to be running again, even not affected by term limits. So it becomes even more important for agencies like Housing Finance to be great at educating, that audience. Because we have not succeeded in each of the years we put in an executive budget, we put in more money for the housing incentive fund, and each year it's been turned down. And part of that's because people don't understand the impact. Brent Sanford got it, Tammy Miller gets it, I get it, but we haven't been able to sell it. So that's my challenge is this is the beginning of getting ready for next year, is get this information out there, start selling the impact, and when we put in a number, then let's see if we can get it done next year. Because like the Bank of North Dakota who's sitting behind you, when we take money and we leave it in, sitting in SIP or someplace else earning nothing, versus if we had deployed it, you'd have more impact. The B&D could be, doing more business that would having an impact. I mean, around the state, it's the same. They're basically parallel in the sense that they both, us doing better, stronger, smarter, higher volume financial activity benefits everybody, particularly during a period of high interest rates. You guys are really important.
Yeah, that we're somewhat counter-cyclical.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, considering high interest, our lowest rate right now is 5%. 1.25% below the market.
Yeah, and I mean, interesting as part of your story to go, how many, because I would get most everybody that you're servicing right now probably couldn't afford to get to actually buy a home right now if they weren't getting their financing from all of you. So that would be transactions that weren't happening. And that does two things. I mean, it slows down new construction, but it also slows down labor movement. I mean, we have people that can't move, we give them a job and then they're like, hey, I came to Bismarck, I couldn't find a place to live. And when I get, then I found one, the house is whatever. But if we sold our house here, and I got a low interest rate, and then I go there and I got to get a new one that's higher, I guess we're not moving. I mean, it slows this, it creates friction right now because people not as mobile if they're locked into things. So part of that is making sure people know that you're here and we're available and we can help. And housing, I know you're going to be participating in the, you probably, if you're listening yesterday, if you didn't have a root canal or something planned, if you were, doing that, you could be you would have heard that housing was a main theme of the talk in terms of workforce infrastructure. So this agency's got to step it up a little bit in terms of being an active role and trying to, drive that dialogue about how do we create the right kind of workforce infrastructure across state, rural areas. You guys play in every market.
And we knew that was coming because, but we met with Maria and Zach, so in case.
Yeah, and I got the bank behind you. I mean, we do the credit stuff, Kirby, we do the by market, but we should probably be thinking a little bit on that because we do the by metros, but we should also be trying to think about how do we think about rural by region, because we got some housing stock problems in rural areas where, I mean, we're in sort of two different worlds. We got some people screaming about their property values, and then we got other towns where somebody comes in and buys a house for $15,000, but only lives there 2 weeks a year, and they use it as a hunting lodge, but they're not shopping all year. They're not living there. Their kids aren't going to school, but they bought up one of the homes in town. I mean, because housing prices are just shockingly low. So how do we have a better, and we're gonna have to be proactive because that's not where there's no demand coming. So it becomes kind of this invisible part of the state, and really understanding even where the housing units are and where we've got issues and where we could improve housing stock, but think about it more holistically. So the bank's gonna have to be part of this housing effort, even though you guys did offload the servicing these guys. We can, when we're thinking about how we're funding, particularly, multifamily and some of that, we're a part of the bank's part of the solution, but we gotta we're all work together as one here. Okay, really good stuff. Okay, what's next?
What's next is our Mr. Nagel here. Pat's worked for the agency. Well, by the time you're done, it'll be 38 years. Officially done.
You make Lynn Helms look like just a slacker. I've been here 26 and a half or something.
So we have a thing for people working a long time at our agency. We got Dolores Hummel who worked for 50 years.
Yeah.
At our place, so.
55, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you were there when I got there, though, so.
Pat and I've worked together for 38 years, so, yeah, it's been a long time, a lot of good, we did a lot of good, a lot of fun. Enjoyed ourselves, we put along the way, and I think we did pretty good. It was a good
And
team.
did you both have hair when you started?
I did. I still got it. I gave up a long time ago.
So you won that one too, right?
I'm not gonna say
you
one.
He did win that contest. I didn't know we were having.
And neither did I. If there was any input.
But anyway, it's been a pleasure to work with him for 38 years. And like I said, I think we've done a lot of good as a team, along with everybody else that's worked there. And so we prepared a little resolution, recommend for you guys to tell Pat about. So let's fire away.
If you would, Pat, we've got a resolution which we'll read into the record here today. Whereas Patrick Nagel joined the North Dakota Housing Finance Agency in 1986, serving most of his remarkable career in the current role as the Chief Financial Officer. And whereas Pat represented the best in public service throughout his career, exemplifying the principles of integrity, respect, dedication, and work ethic like no other, and will always be known as the smartest mortgage bond CFO in history.
That's all the bond guys say.
Yeah.
I don't know.
He's very smart.
You write that yourself.
We'll look at it. Check back another 20 years. But whereas Patrick has led with impactful expertise, supporting, guiding, and collaborating with North Dakota Housing Finance Agency's partners for the betterment of North Dakota, earning the admiration and gratitude of whom all he has worked. And whereas during his tenure at the North Dakota Housing Finance Agency has been vital to the agency, assisting in over 50,000 households find an affordable home, purchase their first home or their next home. And whereas a well-deserved retirement awaits him, Pat will be focusing his attention on not falling off his bike at breakneck speeds, staying upright on his snowboard, traveling, and for a while continuing, as he puts it, typing. He will also be asked, as he wishes, to continue providing green cake to the NDHFA staff on his birthday, and PNP.
Nagel punch.
Yeah, Nagel punch.
Yeah.
The agency's Christmas food day, so apparently you're on retainers to come back for some events next year. Have you given the dates that you want it back?
Yeah.
He'll still be there.
Yeah.
He's
Next
temporary.
Christmas.
He's temporary.
Yeah,
Starting in March.
Yeah, my title is changing, but my work isn't. My wife asked me repeatedly because I need 30 days off apparently between. And it's like, yeah, honey, you know that's not gonna happen, but I'm just not gonna record the time because I'm working on a project I told Dave I would have done. So it is what it
Will they
is.
actually get you to not come into the office for 30 days?
You know,
Yeah, you can't show up.
Yeah, okay, all right, well, that's gonna be, your car may just drive itself. You can't be.
Computer's remote.
Yeah. But anyway, but now therefore, the members of the Industrial Commission hereby express deep gratitude to Patrick Nagel for his 38 years of service to the citizens of North Dakota and wish him the very best in his retirement, adopted this day, the 24th of January, 2024. Congratulations. Okay, and then we're going to, if we could, with your team, Dave, we'll get a picture with Pat right here. We'll do that. You just take a quick break.
Congrats, Pat.
Yeah. Doug, maybe I misunderstood your announcement the other day. Is that your deal? You're gonna take 30 days off?
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't catch all the details. Yeah. You lost me at I'm not going to, and
And people have an understanding that I could run again in the future because the term limits are not retroactive. So it's like I was never governor.
that's right.
I had 8 years left.
You're set. Yeah. My money's on you. I'll be across the hall.
Okay, all right.
So,
B&E, welcome. Good to have you here.
thanks. So first of all, we are looking for an approval for us to apply for a matching grant that the Federal Home Loan Bank has come up with. It's actually a 3-for-1 match. And this is something Carl Bollingberg is the chair of our advisory board. He's also the chair of the Federal Home Loan Bank. So a little history on this. Carl came to us and said, Todd, there's $20 million available for these impact funds. It's across 6 different entities or 6 different states. And he said, boy, I'd really like to see how North Dakota can make sure it gets its fair share. So we actually pulled our group together, pulled Dave into it because one of the things, if you remember, there was an affordable housing task force. Craig Hansen from our group sat on that before the previous session. And when the group got together and they said, what's the best way? One of the best ways to address affordable housing was the Housing Incentive Fund. And so there were some changes made to it. So we sat down and we said, well, maybe this is a chance for the Bank of North Dakota because we are a member of the Federal Home Loan Bank. We can apply for it. And so the way this works is you have to pledge at least a minimum of $2,500. And then they will match that 3-to-1. And so as we sat down and talked about it as a group and talked to Dave and pulled Dave into the loop, what we decided is if we're going to do this, let's have an impact. And so we are requesting up to $2 million. And the reason we're saying up to is that we did have a direct line call with all the banks across the state to make sure that our community banks are aware of this too, because they are eligible to apply for these funds also. And we wanted to be sure that we were treating them fairly and they had their fair shot because some of them may have some projects that they want to sponsor in their area. So we did that. And then we worked with the Federal Home Loan Bank and we said, okay, we're going to ask for the Bank of North Dakota would like to ask, we'll put in 2 million. And so we want 6 from you. And we said, is that too much? And I said, well, wow, that's a lot. Hadn't really expected that, but nobody else has another state bank that can do this. And so what we agreed upon is they said they want to see what applications they all get in, and then they may come back to us and say, hey, would you reduce your request? And we said, we sure would be willing to do that because the intent would be is that whatever projects requested, they'll just be handled on a pro rata basis. So that is the reason that we're asking up to 2 million. The way it would work is we would put 2 million of our capital. We checked with our accountants. It would have to be our capital instead of a donation, and request for that. And we would put 2 million in. And then as a result, we would get 6 million from the Federal Home Bank from the impact fund. And that 8 million would go to HIP. And then Dave would administer it, and just handle it like we do on all of our other affordable housing. I think it makes a lot of sense. We've had a lot of requests from some other people reach out to us, asking us individually to do some certain projects or some certain nonprofits. And we just feel this is the best way to do it. Dave, the HIP, that fund covers the entire state. And then we're not picking individual ones. We just think this is the right way to do it. So that is our request. Be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, so for clarity, you're asking for the approval to put up $2 million from either capital or operating income, but that's the request.
Yes.
For us to approve.
Yes,
But you're applying for 6 million out of a $20 million fund.
exactly.
And then when the our local participating banks, if they're also eligible to apply, are they applying? And then, we're in competition with them, or we would work with Des Moines where they would say, look, these guys applied too, we're going to give it to you guys, and then we pass it through to them?
No, what would happen is they would apply and then they may come to us and say, hey, we've got all these applications and Todd, would you, instead of requesting the 2 million, would you drop your request down to 1 million? Because that's what's kind of left in the big pot.
But I thought we were requesting 6 million.
Or, well, I would say our contribution, you may drop our request or our contribution down of what we would be willing to put in, because that's the 3-to-1 match.
But they're 20 million. So all these participating people only have to come up with 6.6 effectively.
That's correct.
And so they may skinny us down, but
Yes,
but if nobody else applies,
then, yep,
or nobody else applies, you'll tell them we'll do more than 2, right?
we could come back and say if there's still some left over, sure. We feel that we can, I mean, we had a good year last year and we'll talk more about that. It's certainly something we can afford to do out of our capital. Yes.
And I have a strong feeling that no capital is going to be leaving the bank next session.
Good.
Governor, I just add, Carl also mentioned that the Federal Home Loan Bank has a mandate to dedicate 10% of their earnings to affordable housing, but that has some strings attached to it. So they have an additional 5% coming out of the Des Moines Bank that they're committing to affordable housing. And they're hoping that they can continue to do this on a regular basis. So this might just be the first of many opportunities to come.
Well, they like people at a high utilization, and we know that if we get it, we'll get it utilized.
Absolutely.
So that's great. I'm very intrigued by the Hawaii, Montana, North Dakota, Oregon, American Samoa, Guam, Northern Marianas Islands. How in the world did that end up under Des Moines program?
Because the Seattle Federal Home Loan Bank merged with the Des Moines Federal Home Loan Bank.
So that's how it picked up the Pacific.
Yep.
And so then North Dakota and Montana are through Des Moines, and Oregon ended up, but not Washington or something, because they're trying to go to places where there was more need for low-income housing. Is that how we all ended up on this list, or?
Yeah, I think there was when they did the normal.
They did this last year.
Yep.
They just went with some different states.
Some different states, yep. And so this is where the second tranche of being able to do that with the states. Yeah.
Yep.
Chosen.
This is an interesting side note, because those are American territories. When we have NGA, the governor of American Samoa, Marianas Islands, they're always there. I mean, and it's they're running these Pacific nations. They've got, they vote in presidential elections. They've got US dollar. They've got all this other stuff. And it's like, and they got usually a big Air Force base. It's still there.
Yeah.
Yep. Or 2, or a big naval base. Yep. Totally dependent on our economy. Okay. We have a motion. Do we? Not yet? Close? Motion. Okay. And now we have a second. Out of that motion, we'll call for the vote.
Yes.
Governor?
Yes. Motion carries.
Okay.
See you again.
Yep. Thanks, Dave.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Dave. Okay, we're going to the approval of the budget.
Yes.
Yes.
Rob?
In front of you, have a memo regarding our proposed 2024 budget. I would just refer you to page 3, where you'll see the actual numbers for the balance sheet. We'll start there. Just to talk about the balance sheet for a minute, the general assumptions. As far as rates go, we have budgeted in a quarter cut in May and a quarter cut in August. Right now, Fed Fund futures is someplace between 4 and 6. Deposit wise, we have $70 oil pricing stepping down to 60 at 1.25 production, which matches the legislative forecast. Our cost of funds are forecasted to average 186, peaking at 193 in March, and then slowly falling. Tier 1 capital should range from 11.4 to 13.
I thought the legislature is 1.2, not 1.25. I'd have to check. Yeah, but
it matches our current production. So
okay.
Tier 1 capital ROA 207 versus 189 in 2023. If you just glance at the balance sheet on the right-hand side, really total assets projected to come in around 9.7 billion. It's down slightly, about 486 million. That's primarily deposit runoff. So deposits are projected to decrease 7%. This is primarily related to ARPA dollars. We still have $300 million to run off up until 2026. And then our legislative buckets held at the bank fill up, and then we go into kind of spend mode as far as what's at the bank. So that's really what's driving the deposit levels. Up to the asset side of things, just looking at the total loan portfolio. Loan portfolio is projected to increase 6%. This is primarily driven by commercial, which is projected to be an increase of 12%. But this is really driven by Clean Sustainable, as Kelvin had mentioned earlier, the funding of the Clean Sustainable, and then a match loan that we have projected in there. So commercial, excluding CISA and match, is only slightly up, maybe 0.5% to 1% over 2024.
Questions on the balance sheet?
And this is for this fiscal year, calendar year. And the off-balance sheet, the legislative directive, not included in this?
That's correct.
And do we track that separately somehow? I mean, what do we think? Do we keep a separate balance sheet for the?
Yeah, every program has a separate balance sheet.
But is that part of the, when we go for approving the budget, is there the scale of that, because that continues to grow. So how do we think about that? If this is the bank, and then how do we think about that balance sheet?
I would tell you, and Kelvin could talk about it, what we think about as far as the off-balance sheet legislative directed programs is cash flow and availability, given loan demand. And that's kind of where Kelvin and Kylie come into play.
Yeah, so on our off-balance sheet side of things, so, it's going to grow probably towards your 1.2, 1.3 billion this year. So we're about $1 billion right now. And so, we have school construction, infrastructure, all of those. And so, we track all those programs individually, and then we have our portfolio of those programs that we track as its own separate sort of thing. We
can bring that in for you. We should bring it in.
I mean, it'd be interesting, at least from our standpoint right here, but here's the bank.
Yeah.
And here's the legislative directive.
Here's our other
And then
bank.
it's the other,
Yeah.
this sort of the economic development bank. And then here's how the cash flows go between, because you were just describing that, because some of these they start here as a loan, they go over here, and then the loan gets forgiven, because then the source of repayment is coming from this third thing called SIF, which is really oil and gas revenue.
Yep.
But it might be helpful to understand
we can
the
definitely do
flows.
that.
Yeah.
But
See what
just
you're
for the
asking.
purposes of this approval, this is just
This is just
the bank thing.
Yeah.
And Governor, we have not forgot about you. We are putting the finishing touches on where you had asked us to kind of review of all the programs, the history, how they've done. We're in the process of just finishing that up. Rob and his team were close, and then the auditor showed up, and we'll get that to you. So we're developing that. We haven't forgot about that either.
And one, think about all this relative to your participation on the cash management study, because all of this is, we've got to educate RVK on what I'll call the treasury side of things, as opposed to the investing side of things, because I'm as interested on the treasury side as possible, because again, we've got these, I get the thing from OMB, and I can't even get through whatever it was 157 or 300 funds. They're just everywhere. And, it's sort of no rhyme or reason. They've all got their own history of why they were created and why they did their whole thing. But for us to be able to get to a thing where actually every night we know where our cash is and are we optimizing it, if we do that, I think we can get the legislature to say it is absolutely insane to pull capital out of the bank. Just stop. This is where we're getting really high ROI. And if you need capital, let's get it someplace else. But this is the worst place to pull it out of. So that's part of the objective of this cash management study, is to stop. That's got to be a number one most egregious use of our cash, is to turn bank capital into a liability by pulling it out and then redepositing it.
And we had our first meeting with them, so we had a great overview with them.
Did they get that?
Yeah.
Did you explain to them that it's a pain point?
Well, we did, and we said they had the first hour. Let's give you a quick overview, and then you should come back with a lot of questions. But I do have to say, we were really impressed with their ability to catch on pretty quick. They asked really good questions right away. So we had a really good first meeting, and they were the first ones to say, we're going to have to spend a lot of time with you, and we certainly agree to do that. Yep. Okay.
And at least in my direction to them, I was like, hey, we got a lot of smart people, and we can figure out how to invest money for higher return, but we got something that nobody else has got. We got the bank.
Yep.
And so what we want to do is figure out a way to not have a bunch of cash laying around underutilized.
Yep.
Okay, good. Moving to the income statement. 2024 projected at 212 million. This is 19 million over 2023. Just looking at the top and kind of the overall arching message when we start talking about net interest income is the fact that, you know, we had interest rates run another 100 basis points last year. And so up through the yield curve increasing, you know, obviously loan rates increase, deposit rates increase. So the big moves when you look at total interest income up 15% of $53 million is primarily the fact that we have a full year of higher rates in 2024, where 23 was scaling, right? Now we've kind of peaked right now out. So for overall, that's really the driver. CC provides some income because that's, you know, going to be, you know, a few $100 million at the 1 month of FHLB plus 140. So that's, you know, call it 690 right now. But overall, it's just higher yields driving the total interest income up by $53 million.
Do we have, what's the total historic amount of capital the legislature's pulled out of the bank at one time? No, all told. Well, I can tell you just since 71, because I mean, if you even go back 10 years, that's really when they really ramped up. It's close to $1 billion.
Just over.
Just right around $1 billion in 10 years. Prior to that, it was pretty small. It's really. The bank was small and the earnings. Exactly. We're different. Yeah. I mean, then it's only in the last 10 years it turned into an ATM, sort of in concurrent with the North Dakota's economy taking off. Yeah. But if we were, it'd be interesting on a thought experiment and trying to explain this thing is that what would the bank be doing if you had $2 billion in capital instead of $1 billion?
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, sort of not like, oh, we could do 10% more, but what if all that money had never been pulled out? What would be the range, the capacity, the impact it would have? I mean, that'd just be a good thing from a planning standpoint to kind of work through. And we're not going to get $1 billion, but it could help make the case of, you know, how do we get there in 10 years from now by not? I mean, how do we go from 1 billion to 2 billion in the next 10 years as opposed to still be at 1 billion 10 years from now because they keep pulling everything out? I mean, and growth is a good thing. The bank's got to grow with North Dakota economy growing. So then just glancing at, you know, interest expense wise, again, deposit, you can see total deposit interest expense projected to be up 38%, or almost $44 million. But just the change in rates of that 43 million, 37 million is related to rates. So again, just higher yields for a longer period of time. Borrowings down 59%, about 22 million. We have a significant amount of investment portfolio runoff in 2024, and in fact, the next 3 years. This year alone will run off $850 million. So we have a significant amount of liquidity reinvesting or loaning out and picking up higher yields than previous. And then moving down into the non-interest expense, salaries and benefits projected to be up 14%. We have 4 new FTEs and 6 open positions that we have layered in. And then we have a full year of the 6% and then a half a year of a 4% factored into there. IT and system access up 32%. We have some NDIT legislative increases. Again, they had the 6 and the 4 plus some inflationary adjustments for about $500,000. And consulting and software changes about $2 million. And that's primarily related to some FIS, which is really our operations software, where cash management, those sorts of things that we're working through. So at the end of the day, let me touch on provision. So you'll see as you scroll all the way down to the bottom of 2024, right above the 212, provision 12 million projected relative to 23 came in at 7.5 million. So it's a $4.5 million increase as far as projection goes. We had a lot of conversations on this. So, you know, we are involved in larger deals. We have a significant larger portfolio. You know, we're projecting at the end of 2024, we hit record in 2023. 2024, we're projecting to get close to $6 billion of a loan portfolio. And so with that, with the larger deals, the average size deal being larger, with higher rates, we know the impact of rate resets.
you know, and just the overall, I think, economic uncertainty that we're facing, we felt it necessary to beef up the budget as it relates to the provision. You know, just today, read an article on credit card balances are higher, above pre-pandemic levels. Delinquencies are above pre-pandemic levels nationally. Auto loan delinquencies are above pre-pandemic. So there's definitely consumer stress. So being cautious, we thought it be prudent to beef up the provision from a budgetary standpoint. So overall, 2024 budgeted net income looking to be around $212 million.
And is there anything when you guys put this together that you think like sort of external factors? I mean, you got sort of oil prices built in here, but is there, we've been so consistently been able to keep having record year after record year. Is there anything that you think here in January, when you look ahead the next 12 months, that's going to stop that from happening again?
I think they're sandbagging, Governor. No, I told them that. No, I told them before I left, what I'm going to set up high expectations. I think the big thing that's driving it, Governor, really the thing that's driving it, we have grown so much, our loan portfolio now. And again, we earn much higher yields on our loan portfolio and that growth. And I would tell you, the other thing is that, the community banks that we are much more needed in much more transactions. It used to be, I mean, back when I was with Wells and when there was a big deal to be done, it was Wells or it was a US bank because a lot of them couldn't do that. And they were very active in those markets. You just don't, I mean, Wells is down to 2 bankers. They're all in Fargo and they basically, and so what has happened is our community banks are doing more of those transactions and they're getting bigger and they can't handle them. And so without us, and so we're feeling that need and that is really what's driving, it's helping drive volume.
Yeah,
I think, and the economy's, I mean, we've had a pretty.
When somebody looks back at this over a 20-year period and they go, what happened in North Dakota? And they go, wow, every other state that was rural where the US banks and the Wells Fargo and everybody, they went down, we're going to buy up all the small banks. Oh, that didn't work. Oh, we're going to sell all that real estate. Now we're going to pull back. Now we're going to do this. And then their local community banking fails. And now we've got, you know, Bell Bank and First Interstate and Western and Choice and Starion and whatever. They're all getting stronger and they're all getting bigger and they're all doing lower loan volume. We could end up with the strongest local community family-owned bank system in America because of this institution.
Yep.
I mean, that
it is.
I would argue that we have it.
Yeah, no, add 10 years on.
Yeah.
And we're more mergers, wealth that's being created, you know, by us being able to have, you know, finance and liquidity here is part of what it is. I mean, it's like we're retaining some of that capital. You know, before a lot of people made money in North Dakota and it all left. I mean, I know that personally because it's like when we're trying to do stuff and trying to invest in North Dakota and like everybody that had money, oh no, we're investing someplace else. So now we're getting some of that capital coming back. But I mean, there's a story that has to be told over our longer arc of time than just an annual report. And I don't know if it's when you guys are bragging about your record year. I mean, one thing to think about, even when we approach the legislature next year, is to say, if it's publicly reported, go, here's where community banking was in North Dakota a decade ago in 2000, you know, start 2010. Here's what it looked like then. And here's the share that was the majors. And here's where it is today. And in that market share and the capital and the size of all that stuff is just dramatic. And I mean, that's part of your success story that we need to tell. Not just this, because we always, oh, we're bigger and we had a record year, but that's like this. I mean, there's the impact of this.
That actually is my message when I talk to legislators. I smile and go, you always talk about a net profit. That is not what drives our economy, the biggest impact. And lessons learned from last legislative session, we've already lined up over all the bankers, Brian, all those guys are coming in. They're going to testify about how important it is, not us. So we're bringing it in.
And here's the other thing. I'm talking to Dennis Johnson, his wife, yesterday after the state of the state is one of the benefits, which I'm going to continue to push for, if we just say, look, the legislature shouldn't and may not even be legally in the position to pull capital out of this bank, if that's the job of the Industrial Commission, is that if that wasn't hanging over your head like the proverbial axe in the ceiling in the basement cellar, you guys would all have 4 months more of your time to actually go out and
Oh, yeah.
and do business across
Yeah.
North Dakota. And instead, you have to stop running the bank and all rush over here every day to try to defend somebody from coming in and stealing your capital. I mean, it's like we're supposed to be your board, and then they're the ones that are appropriating $140 million dividend check without even understanding the impact on the business model. I mean, no board that runs an organization would let some outside group decide the dividend policy. And the dividend policy is egregious in terms of this, of like, nobody dividends 50% of their profits.
Banks do, but anyway, that's a.
Yeah.
But that was something that we talked about a lot after last session was, I mean, we were on a fire drill a lot trying to, keep up with it. So, yeah.
And when you say banks do, banks are trying to compete with other banks in terms of return for shareholders.
Yep.
And here, the objective is not return. We're not trying to get return for state government. We're trying to get return in the economy. We're trying to get return in terms of the private sector growth of what we're doing, and that entails a different strategy. So we have to be a little bit careful when we say we're just like a bank. We're just like a bank. No, we're different, and then we got to do some things differently, including how we think about dividend policy.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. So you want this approved?
Yes, please.
Just completely sandbagged thing.
That's what I'm gonna tell everybody.
I'm hoping we blow it, because if we don't, it's gonna be another rough year like 2023 was.
Got a motion, and we have I'll second it. Before you guys got here, I don't know, we were thinking about having our first tie vote ever.
I saw that. We weren't here when that was discussed.
You do this one?
I know we're gonna leg wrestle.
I made it back. So if you needed a second, I can second.
Well, Doug's back. Oh, we're not gonna have a tie vote. Doug's back.
Yes.
Am I calling for the vote?
Yes, you are. Yep.
Commissioner?
Yes.
Attorney General?
Yes.
Governor?
Yes, motion carries. Thanks for joining us again, Doug. Okay, so that, anything else that we need to cover here? This is all. Zip through all that. We need to go to confidential now?
Yes.
You have a magic incantation.
Governor, I move that under the authority of the North Dakota Century Code, section 6-09-35, 44-04-18.4, 44-04-19.1, 44-04-19.2, that the industrial commission entered into an executive session for the purpose of Bank of North Dakota confidential business and for attorney consultation.
We have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. We'll call for the vote.
Attorney General?
Yes.
Commissioner?
Yep.
Yes.
Governor?
Yes. Motion carries. The commission is meeting in executive session regarding B&D business pursuant to NDCC 6-09-35 to consider the items listed on the agenda under B&D confidential business. Only commission members, their staff, commission staff, B&D staff will participate. After the B&D executive session, the commission will meet in executive session for attorney consultation. Only commission members, their staff, commission's attorney, and commission staff will participate in that executive session. Any formal action taken by the commission will occur after it reconvenes in open session. I remind commission members and those present in the executive session, the discussion must be limited to the announced purposes, which is anticipated to last 30 to 45 minutes. Executive session will begin as soon as we clear the room and reconnect. Okay, we're back in open session. When we have a still have a quorum. During the executive session ended at 5:30 p.m. Commissioners reconvened in open session. During the Bank of North Dakota executive session, the commission made a motion related to a loan application. Please call the roll on the bank motion related to the loan application.
Attorney General?
Aye.
Governor?
Aye. And the Ag Commissioner was on during the executive session, but is not back in again, but we've got that motion carries. During the Bank of North Dakota executive session, the commission made a motion related to the annual Bank of North Dakota de minimis cap resolution. Please call the roll on the bank motion.
Attorney General?
Yes.
Governor?
Yes, motion carries. During the attorney consultation executive session, commission consulted with and provided guidance to attorney regarding those items listed on the agenda. What are the commission's wishes?
Okay. First, that we approve a comment letter related to the Minnesota Renewable Energy Standard. And you want me to go through the whole thing?
Well, you're making the motion, so it's up to you.
Also not. And the newly created carbon-free standard under Minnesota statute 2216B.1691, and authorizes the Office of the Industrial Commission to submit that's the letter to the Minnesota Public Utilities Commission on behalf of the commission.
Second, Pat. Call for the vote.
Attorney General,
Yes.
Governor,
Yes. And
Also move that the commission authorize the funding from its lignite litigation fund pool that was authorized in the 68th Legislative Assembly for the purposes of providing technical support from the North Dakota Transmission Authority related to the United States Environmental Protection Agency's mercury and air toxins standard.
second. Call for the vote.
Yes.
Governor,
Yes. Motion carries. Last item of business from today is the consideration approval from the December 18 minutes, which were distributed ahead of time.
So
We have a second. Call for the vote.
Attorney General,
yes.
Governor,
Yes. Motion carries. Any other business? Karen, Reese? Okay. Well done to the whole team, and appreciate all the hard work always that goes into this. And Aaron, happy birthday. Glad you're able to spend your birthday with us.
Nobody else I'd rather.
Yeah.
Okay, that concludes our business, and the meeting is adjourned.
Your family will always be there, but we're here just once a month. I mean, yeah, there's that.